Of the Town of Los Gatos Council of April 19th to order. If we could start with a roll call, please.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Sayak.
Here.
Councilmember Hudis.
Here.
Councilmember Badami.
Here.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Rennie.
Here. So everybody's present. If we could roll our meeting decorum video, please.
The public is welcome to participate at Town Council meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meetings is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. At each meeting, the following expectations of civil conduct shall apply. 1. For the benefit of the entire community, the Town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the council agenda. 2. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at council meetings. 3. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at Town Council meetings. 4. All public comments at the Town Council meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. 5. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the mayor may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the council exiting the chamber. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the council would return to the chamber and the mayor would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a council meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code Section 403. These expectations of conduct also apply to meetings of all town boards, committees, and commissions.
Okay, thank you. So next up, we have a presentation from West Valley Community Services. If I could invite Josh Cello, I guess, to take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Town Council, City Manager, Town Manager, and staff. It's an honor to be here with you all tonight. And I'm grateful to be joined by one of our clients as well, Sketch, who's going to share a little bit about her experience as a member of the community. But we can go to the next slide. For folks who are watching tonight but are not familiar with West Valley Community Services, we are a social service agency that serves the West Valley communities of Los Gatos, Saratoga, Cupertino, Montesrino, and West San Jose. Our mission is to unite the community to fight hunger and homelessness, and we do that through a variety of different programs and services, which we'll share briefly with you this evening. The purpose of the presentation tonight is to provide an update on the work we've been doing in partnership with the town over the course of the last year and a little bit longer. Next slide, please. We serve a very diverse clientele, as you can see on your slide, people that come to us from many different backgrounds, identities, and challenging situations. What unifies all of our clients is economic disadvantage. In this case, folks live at or below 250% of the federal poverty line, which means their annual household income, for example, as an individual, is about $32,000 before taxes. And for a family of four, that's just under $66,000 before taxes. And this is at a time where the self-sufficiency income for Santa Clara County Pre-COVID, for a family of 4, was about 96,000. So these are folks who are really struggling the most to survive in a community that is incredibly expensive to live in a region that's expensive to live in, and now really struggling more in face of the increased cost of housing and food that's gone up exponentially since the start of COVID and then the war in Ukraine. Next slide, please. We offer a variety of services. Of the list of services you see on your screen, there are 3 core services we provide. The first is case management. Each of our clients, as they come in, meets with the case manager, who's both their advocate and their system navigator, helping them identify a host of services that they're eligible for, either things provided by West Valley Community Services, available by the municipalities in which they live, by the county, or by the federal government. The 2 most used services beyond case management are our food, both the Parket Market that travels throughout the West Valley, including into the town of Los Gatos, and our market here at our office in Cupertino. I'm using the word market intentionally. We work to destigmatize the experience of accessing food and brand all of our food programs as markets. They are selection choice programs at no cost. So clients choose what we have available in our market programs from our inventory at no cost to them or their family. We also provide a variety of different housing supportive services. Of the most in demand is rental assistance, which we'll talk a little bit more. You'll have seen that over the course of the last 3 years, the amount of rental assistance we provided to Los Gatos residents has really grown significantly, as you can imagine, in light of COVID-19. This has been in deep demand to help keep people housed, which is much less expensive than rehousing folks who become unhoused, but also to help folks move into a supportive housing environment. I won't talk about the other services, but you can see on the slide, we do offer a variety of other supportive services and programs to assist our clients. And here you can see on the slide, this is a picture of a client shopping in our market in Cupertino. We have some Parket Market photos later in the presentation. Next slide. So our approach has really 3 steps. The initial step is crisis intervention. Each client meets with the case manager who works with them to develop a plan to help address their immediate crisis. We use an intake tool called the Self-Sufficiency Matrix that identifies what areas our clients need the most support in, and then helps them develop a plan to address it. It usually always includes some form of budget review, so our clients and our case managers can identify where they stand, the client stands financially, and then usually a referral to a variety of internal and external programs. Short term, we're looking to focus on building household assets, so clients have more money available to pay for their core needs. And then, of course, in the long term, we're looking to develop a permanent plan to help the client re-achieve stability and self-sufficiency. This journey is different for each client, and there's no one time period or one story. There are so many different clients who come to us with their own individual situations and needs, but overall, these are the steps we look at. But we also take direction from our clients, and they help us understand how best we can support them on their journey, and then we try to be there with our resources to support them there. If you go to the next slide, I'm not going to go into the details, but you can see our work is underpinned by a theory of change. This is how we view our work and how our different program services support the varying needs of our clients where they are in their journey from crisis to stability to self-sufficiency. And basically, each person where they are in that journey needs a basket of slightly different services and supportive needs. When you have time on your own, if you review this and have any questions, please let me know. But I wanted you to get an idea that we do have a vision for the methodological underpinnings of how and why we do the work that we do in partnership with our clients. If you go to the next slide, you can see for the most recently completed fiscal year, we served 1,200 folks for the first time. This is broadly in the West Valley. I'll get into the Los Gatos numbers shortly. We assisted over 3,000 folks in total. We helped facilitate 1.8 million meals made possible through our different market programs and distributed $1.2 million of rental assistance. For the town of Los Gatos, you can go to the next slide. for the most recently completed fiscal year, we had 104 new Los Gatos clients come to us. These are folks who came to us for the first time, many of whom were impacted most recently by COVID-19. I'm really grateful for the partnership of town staff. We had a really great connection. We have had a great working connection, but during COVID, as situations arose where people were impacted directly by COVID-19 infection and needed support, we worked directly with town staff quickly to address those situations and assuring that town residents had access to our services immediately. And I just want to commend the town staff for the speed at which we were able to connect. 18% of all of our clients are Los Gatos residents. We had 169 clients access the Park Market in the town at open doors, and that's our Park Market location in the town of Los Gatos. And I know that I saw the mayor visit there, I think earlier this year, and it was nice to be able to give tours and show you the work there. And I know that Councilmember Sayak and I believe Councilmember Risto also visited the Park Market at different times as well. I hope I'm not missing anyone, but anyone who wants a tour, please come visit our Park Market. We're very proud of the vehicle. We had 246 Los Gatos residents participate in our special programs, which is essentially our back to school program that prepares children to go back to school ready to learn, and our Gift of Hope program, which is our holiday program. And then we had 40 town residents receive emergency rental and utility assistance. The next few slides will show you just the household composition of the town of Los Gatos. You can see 65% of our Los Gatos clients are single adults. That's the household composition. They identify as single adults. And these are self-reported statistics that the clients give us at the point of intake, and also slightly more male head of households than female head of households for the town of Los Gatos. And then the next slide will show you the race and ethnicity breakdown. Again, these are self-reported by our clients themselves. And you can see where we are with that. I also wanted to provide you where we are, because our current fiscal year is nearly over. We end June 30th. So year to date, we've had 47 new Los Gatos clients. 64 of those households are actually coming to Cupertino to shop at our market here in our building. We have 111 households accessing the Park Market at the Open Doors location. And then you can see the special programs number. We have 10 unhoused clients that we're currently working with from the town of Los Gatos, and we've distributed almost $100,000 in rental assistance to 25 households. Rental assistance is in high demand post-COVID, as I referenced, and we've also started seeing requests for support from small business owners who've not recovered since COVID-19. And I just want to show you the trend of rental assistance over the course of the last 5 years. So you can see in 2017, 2018, we distributed $35,000. The small number is the number of clients that we served that year, so 16 clients. We hit a high water mark last fiscal year, almost $237,000 of rental assistance to Los Gatos households, to 40 households. And then we're just at about 100,000 this year. This is much higher than pre-COVID, as you can see. And we're uncertain what the next year is going to look like specifically, but we're anticipating for another year of high demand for rental assistance. Now, I can sit and talk all day about our work, but I think it's most instructive to hear directly from our clients. So I want to invite Sketch to talk about her experience as a client of West Valley Community Services. Sketch?
Awesome, that's me. Okay, there. Hi everyone. So my name is Sketch, and yes, I years ago, back in I want to say 2015, 2016, I did utilize the West Valley Community Services. At the time, I was homeless, and I was homeless in the town of Los Gatos. And I went there mainly for the food, and also what I noticed now looking back though. But what I really liked there is they meet you where you're at, right? Like their case management met with me individually. They met me where I was and what I was going through, and just to utilize their services appropriately. At the time, I was actually in a very abusive relationship. So the woman actually reached out and like provided me outside resources for that at the time. And it was a huge change in the trajectory of like what was going on for me at that time. For me currently, where I'm at today is like, I'm no longer homeless, but I do a lot of work with advocacy, and something that I've seen my uncle utilizes West Valley Community Services. He's currently homeless in Los Gatos, Mark Salazar. And I know Beverly, and I know a lot of the people in the community over there, the homeless community, Mike Schultz, and just a lot of the people out there still. And something that I see that is missing that I would love to, help out, however, is the fact that there's limited times for showers. Even when I was out there was one day a week. And when you live outside and outdoors, like, you want to bathe a little more than once a week. Another thing is a lack of case management. It's not a large community of homeless in the town of Los Gatos. It is something that could easily be like, homelessness could be abolished in the town of Los Gatos with some case management and some like hands-on, meeting them where they're at, and just that conversation to assess their needs. Also housing, right? I know there's a huge stigma attached to people that are unhoused. I know for myself, currently, my uncle, he has recidivism of going in and out of prison, but my family is actually from the town of Los Gatos, the Salazars. All my aunts and uncles, there was 12 of them. They went to Los Gatos High. So every time he goes into prison, he comes out and he wants to go home, right? I was blessed to get housing and a housing voucher in 2017. And I have been trying to get back home to the town of Los Gatos since, and with no luck, right? With a housing voucher. And it's a town that I grew up in. Like, I spent every weekend there. I had a horse. We had a ranch right when you go right there onto 17, the Salazars, and that whole town. I would go to the wishing well that's no longer there by the post office. And there's something going wrong here if we're unable to provide housing for those that are actually from there, as well as the unhoused. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sketch, for being here tonight and sharing your experience. I appreciate that deeply. And again, as we conclude our presentation, I want to give an opportunity, if we have time and it's allowed, for any questions folks have. But I also want to recognize again that this work is done in partnership with the town of Los Gatos, and we're grateful for the work we've done together to support the folks in our community who need our help.
Josh, it looks like we do have a question from Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. And I was not aware of some of the things that you shared with us, and I want to thank you for the work and for the caring. I did have a question. I'm not sure if you have it at your fingertips or could provide it later, and that is, what is the population of over 60 in Los Gatos and across the communities you serve that are utilizing your services? And if you don't have it now, that's fine.
I can follow up with you. I do not have that number right now, but we do have it readily available, and I'm happy to follow up with you after the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. I think those numbers say a lot, but more compellingly, Sketch's story says a lot. But I noticed on the graph where you were showing rent assistance and how much it went up, what was also, informative and startling to me is the last 2 years on there showed dollar amounts that were higher for a smaller number of clients in a comparison. And so, that showed that the number of people that needed aid wasn't necessarily going up, but the amount of aid needed was growing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it is a higher number. So our highest year was 2019-2020, where we served 57 clients, which was more than twice the number of clients we served 2 years before. But what also happened, so while the numbers did, 2x, 2.5 times, it wasn't astronomically larger given the dollar amounts. What we saw throughout the West Valley, not just in the town of Los Gatos, was that people had so much accumulated rent debt as the result of being out of work due to COVID-19. They needed more resources to catch up and not be at risk of eviction once the moratorium was lifted. So our average, I don't know what the number was Los Gatos, but our average rental assistance award went up much higher than it was prior to COVID-19, because that's what we needed to do to keep people safe in their homes.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And
Absolutely.
So these are typically clients who are working, but either were not working because of the pandemic, or their salaries were lower, or just the pandemic caused them to get even further behind.
Yes, and we're also talking about folks that don't have the capacity typically to save money or enough money to weather a storm like a pandemic, you know, and did not have several months of rent if they were underemployed or unemployed, not drawing a paycheck during COVID. They had no resources to fall back on. The pandemic really laid bare this savings challenge that exists for folks who are living to paycheck. They don't have the capacity to weather those storms.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. I'd like to thank Sketch for sharing her story. I'm happy that she's not homeless anymore, and I would love to be able to build some more affordable housing in Los Gatos. We do have some coming soon, but it is age restricted also for seniors. But hopefully in the future, we can build more affordable housing so you can return to the community that you grew up in. I'd like to thank Josh for your presentation and all the good work that West Valley Community Services does. And I guess I should apologize a little bit because I have been volunteering on the first Wednesday in your local market, your on-site market. But the last few and probably the next couple, I've just been too busy that I haven't been able to volunteer. But for those that haven't tried volunteering, it's actually very rewarding to help sort food and help stock the shelves and so forth. So again, thank you for your presentation and everything that you do. So next up, if I could ask Mr. Schultz for a closed session report.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Council met in closed session on April the 12th to discuss labor negotiations. No action was taken that requires reporting under the Brown Act.
All right, thank you. And now we go to council and manager matters. We could start off with Vice Mayor Risto.
Okay, thank you. Well, in addition to attending gobs of meetings with nothing specific to report out of them, I just wanted to mention that I think like all council members, we're one at a time meeting with the HDL cannabis consultants to get more information as we move forward, eventually with the community workshops and just learning opportunities. As a member of the Santa Clara Valley Water Commission, we met and I'm sure everybody knows this, but we are in a severe drought. And water is an incredibly precious resource. As we move forward and look toward trying to get everybody to conserve 15%, for those of us that are always conserving, it gets harder and harder to cut back. This is going to become a lifestyle for us to use as little water as possible to reuse or save the water we've got. And so Valley Water, and I believe on our town sustainability pages, we'll be having information about rebates for putting in gray water so you can irrigate your plants and outside with your water from your washing machine. There's ways to set that up. There's ways to catch the water coming out of your gutters. So on those infrequent occasions when it does rain, let's catch as much water as possible, and you can use that for your landscaping. And finally, for those who still have lawns, when you're ready to rip those out and replace them with native plants, there's a rebate program where you can get money back for replacing your sprinklers with drip system and replacing an ornamental lawn with pollinator-friendly native plants. I had the pleasure of, there's 3 items that were really specifically wonderful. On Saturday evening, I was also joined by Councilmember Sayak and Mayor Rennie at the Islamic Center Iftar community dinner. So in Los Gatos, we do have a mosque, and the Islamic community is observing Ramadan right now. And from sunrise to sunset, they not only fast, they don't drink any water. And so if you can imagine, at the end of each day, there's an opportunity for the community to come together and share food and share community. And we were invited to participate in their Iftar dinner Saturday night, which was just incredible. It was so lovely, and they were so welcoming. And, it was just good to participate in a community event like this, especially the night before Easter. So multicultural, multi-religion. This morning, I interviewed with some Saratoga High School students in place of the mayor who was unable to do it. And for a film class, they're doing a study about which downtown is the most teen friendly. And so I got to talk about all the wonderful businesses and things to do in Los Gatos and why it's such a great place for teenagers. And I touted our youth commission and a lot of the changes that they promote and encouraged these students that if they want to see changes in their town, that they can be the voice of change. And then this afternoon, I think Mayor Rennie was there at the Rotary. Rotary had a speaker event where Sammy L. Davis, who is also known as the real Forrest Gump. The movie Forrest Gump was kind of based on him. He's a Medal of Honor winner, awardee and Vietnam veteran, came to the Rotary to speak. There was a large turnout from the community. And then at the Veterans Memorial, a paver commemorating his service was unveiled. And I had the absolute pleasure and honor to meet him and welcome him to Los Gatos. And, it's very humbling. He is such a humble man and so inspiring. So lots of good things happening in Los Gatos. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you for filling in for me at one time. Councilmember Sapp?
Thank you. Since we last met, the Executive Board of the Cities Association met to plan last week's Legislative Select Committee and Board of Directors meeting. And thank you, Mayor Rennie. I had to jump off real quick for a work event, and so he filled in for Select Committee for me. We are curating, I say we, Cal City's Peninsula Division is curating our next event. It's May 18. And again, this is designed for local elected officials in both San Mateo and Santa Clara County. And on May 18, we are actually hosting someone from Governor Newsom's office to discuss the CARES Court and how that applies to our municipalities. And we'll have someone from the Sheriff's office there to discuss how that is supposed to interact, and encourage all of my colleagues to join us. It will be in Mountain View at Michael's. And again, it's a great way to meet your fellow colleagues. And the only other thing is just, again, it was a holy weekend for many this past weekend. And I think it was great to see our community celebrating one another's diversity in religion and culture. So again, I echo lots of great things. Thank you, Vice Mayor Risto.
Yeah, it's kind of fun how all the religions lined up this year. The holidays all lined up at the same time. Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. On April 7th, I met with HDL consultants and the town staff regarding the cannabis study. And on April 7th, later the same day, as board member for the West Valley Waste Management and Clean Water Authorities, the board met briefly and agreed to the extension of virtual meetings. On April 11th, I attended a meeting at the Democracy Tent as an observer. The meeting included a presentation by Councilmember Hudes regarding the draft 2040 general plan and issues relating to housing in Los Gatos. On April 13th, I attended a meeting at the Planning Commission as an observer regarding the draft 2040 general plan. And on April 18th, yesterday, I attended another meeting at the Democracy Tent as an observer regarding the need for a fiscal impact analysis as it relates to the proposed draft 2040 general plan.
All right, thank you. And for me, in addition to the items mentioned, I had four BACMed, Bay Area Air Quality Management District meetings I attended, the board meeting on 4/6, their legislative committee on 4/11, and their stationary source committee meeting on 4/18. Also on 4/13, I hosted a discussion or connected the BACMed staff to some researchers at Lawrence Livermore Labs so that their research and the product they were developing would be relevant in the regulatory world. I also, let's see, on 4/8, I did a presentation to a group of realtors about what's going on in Los Gatos. On 4/12, I attended the senior committee subcommittee of the senior committee. And then I also attended that senior committee on 4/18. On 4/13, I attended a tree planting, kind of an Arbor Day tree planting with the city of Montecito. They were planting them on Winchester, where basically one side of the curb was curb and gutter. The gutter was Los Gatos, I guess, and the other side of the curb was Montecito. So they invited me along with the Montecito mayor for their ceremony of the planting of those trees at Via Sereno, I think it was. I think Via Sereno and Winchester. Let's see. Also on 4/14, as Councilmember Sack said, I attended the Cities Association Legislative Committee and the board, and then filled in for the last part of the selection committee. We selected several people. The one that was significant to me was another BACMed appointee. We have 4 appointees from our county to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. 2 are done by the supervisors and 2 are done by the Cities Association. And we had the other one besides me step down. So there was a vacancy to fill, and we appointed Sergio Lopez from Campbell to join me as the Cities Association appointees to BACMed. And I think that's everything on my list. Next, I'll go to manager matters.
Actually, I think we need to hear from Councilmember Hudes first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's fine.
Your video maybe wasn't on, and that's why I didn't do it.
No problem. There was one meeting I did want to highlight that actually relates. We had a series of senior committee meetings this week, including our work plan group, and we were able to now receive a first view of the survey that was taken in town that the council authorized. And it really provided a lot of sort of substance to the needs of our seniors in town. We also heard from the group that's been doing communications and workshops, and some of those needs were amplified and made more specific. And then finally, the benchmarking group looked at the services provided in Los Gatos as compared to 7 other peer communities. And again, the results were kind of eye-opening. And I would say a little bit irreverently that we are now turning the corner from admiring the problem into fixing it. And so we're looking forward to a workshop in May to really define a roadmap for the future based on all this information. The other meeting that was related to it, in spite of all of the sort of high level goals that we have, one of the things was, can we fix the bathrooms in the rec center? And I attended the HCD advisory committee, and we found that we got a grant for, I think it's $150,000 to repair our restrooms. So I am pleased that that happened earlier last week. So thank you.
Okay, now I think we're ready for manager matters.
Okay, thank you so much. To Councilmember Hudes' point about the senior survey, those results are being posted online, so the public will be able to digest all that wonderful information. Secondly, I want to invite all of you to our Spring into Green celebration on Sunday, April 24th from 10 to 1. It'll be at Town Plaza Park as well as on Main Street. Lots of great activities. We have several of our commissions that will be there, as well as many of our nonprofit partners. We're very excited to be able to host this event.
it's been a couple of years since we've done it. So please join us and help us celebrate Earth Day and Arbor Day and all of those good sustainability efforts. We are still recruiting for our adult commissions. Applications are due on the 27th of May, and the interviews will be held on June 7th. We are also wrapping up our recruitment for youth commission. I do see that we have some youth commissioners here with us this evening. So if you could help us promote the opportunity to be part of the youth commission for next year, we'd really appreciate it. Applications are due on May 6th. And we'll be doing interviews on May 16th. So looking forward to everyone's applications. And then I know we typically recognize various staff professional disciplines over the course of the year, and tomorrow is Administrative Professionals Day. So I just want to say a big shout out to all of our administrative professionals here in the town and the support that you give to all of us, to the council, to the town manager's office, to each department. Thank you so much for your work day in and day out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And one thing I would add, I forgot that I participated in was today. That's probably why I forgot. It was so close, right? Was I gave testimony again for Senator Cortez's SB 100 bill in the Judiciary Committee today, and it did pass through that committee. So hopefully I was helpful and continue to support that bill. Next up is our consent calendar, which consists of items 1 through 11. Would any council members wish to pull an item from consent? Seeing none, I will give the public an opportunity to speak on consent. I think Supervisor Wasserman would like to speak.
Unmute. Hello there, can you hear me all?
Yep, we can hear you.
Wonderful. It's great to see the whole council and Chief Jamie and Laurel and Captain Todd and Rob. And I did see Steve, the guitar man Conway, go through there at one point. So anyway, I want to say thank you to all of you. I'm here to speak on item number 9. You are honoring one of the finest men I have ever known. Our son turned 33 yesterday. I met Phil Knopf when Sean was 5. So 28 years ago. I don't think you have video, it's just sound, correct? I was going to show you my Los Gatos Little League hat, so forget that. So I'm just calling to say, this was something when I was on your council 15 years ago, we voted to vote to Phil Knopf to have a little plaque mounted to the wall by the snack shack. And I don't think it ever got done, but what you're doing is far greater, actually naming the field after Phil Knopf. And I'll tell you, Phil and Bonnie Knopf, there just aren't nicer people. There may be people as nice, but there's nobody nicer than Phil and Bonnie Knopf. And what you are doing is absolutely wonderful, well-deserved. He's been a fundraiser, a contractor, a board member for a quarter of a century with Little League. And that's 500 kids a year that go through that program. And he's the best. And what you're doing is absolutely awesome. Thank you for honoring Phil Knopf, one of Los Gatos' finest citizens. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Wasserman, for helping to recognize how wonderful Phil Knopf is. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, I will come back to council. Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you. Well, with that lead into honoring Phil Knopf and all the other really good items we have on the consent calendar, I move to approve items 1 through 11.
Okay, Councilmember Sayak.
I'll second that and echo the compliments to Phil.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from council? Any comments from council members on consent items? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Councilmember Sayak. That looked like
Aye.
a yes. Yeah, okay, there you go. Councilmember Hudes.
Aye.
Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, so our consent calendar passes unanimously for items 1 through 11. So next on our agenda is verbal communications. This is an opportunity for members of the public to talk to us about items that are not on our agenda somewhere. You have 3 minutes to do that. And let's see, I see 2 hands. Let's start with Juliana Pendleton.
And Arn, if you can put up her slideshow, please.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Rennie and council members. My name is Juliana Pendleton, and I'm a lifelong resident of Los Gatos and the Environmental Advocacy Assistant for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. One of our major areas of focus is on reducing artificial light at night and promoting responsible lighting practices. Thank you for presenting my slideshow this evening. Since LED fixtures have been introduced, artificial light has dramatically increased globally and locally. More and more research highlights the negative effects of too much light on all species, from disorienting birds during migration, to trees blooming too early in the season, to baby sea turtles going to the road instead of the ocean, to causing mental health problems and cancer in humans. Next slide, please. LEDs exacerbate light pollution because they tend to be a lot brighter and have a colder color or wavelength than traditional light sources. The LED is a much more efficient light source and has many benefits. They last longer, use less energy, and require less maintenance. But since 2012, when cities, businesses, and homes started converting to LEDs, lighting has proliferated, and our environment is now overlit as people use more light in more places more of the time. LEDs tend to have a high correlated color temperature, meaning they are a colder, brighter light than high-pressure sodium lamps. This is more harmful for humans, ecosystems, and wildlife. Next slide. Last year, we advocated for a dark sky and bird-safe design policy goal in the draft 2040 general plan, and the GPAC included it in the draft general plan update. At last week's Planning Commission, several other fellow community members also voiced their support for a dark sky ordinance and bird protections. I hope you will all support including a dark sky and bird safe design ordinance in the final general plan update when it comes to council this summer, hopefully. Next slide. Light pollution is a big issue, but it is reversible. We must ensure lighting from buildings, trails, parking lots, streets, and even large art installations don't inadvertently harm wildlife and habitat or humans. If you would like more information on this issue, please email advocate@scvas.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pendleton. Looks like we have a question from Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you, and thank you for calling attention to this matter. The question I had, you mentioned concerns with LED lights, but isn't it the case that an LED light, you can control the temperature, the color temperature much more easily? And is the issue more with the specific color temperatures that are being used as compared to an issue with LED lights themselves?
That's a really good question, and thank you, Councilmember Hudes, for bringing it up. So with LEDs, it is easier to control the dimming or brightness of individual light fixtures. You cannot change the correlated color temperature of specific light fixtures. And on the market, the most common correlated color temperatures are currently around 5,000 Kelvin. Now 4,000 and 3,000 are becoming more common, but it is very difficult to find correlated color temperatures of 2,700 Kelvin or below, which that is the CCT that gives you that warmer glow that we used to see with more traditional light sources. So that is where a big issue comes from, is when LEDs were first started being introduced into cities, they were very bright, and they did have up to 6,000 Kelvin for CCT. And that's where a lot of the issue came from. So I know our town, as we're converting to LED, is 3,000 Kelvin, which is good. It could be better. But I think what's important especially for our town being so close to the hillsides and natural environments. We really need to focus on smart lighting and responsible outdoor lighting, so including dimming, maybe shutting lighting off between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., making sure our parks, is even right outside the Civic Center, are not lit at light. And I know with the new sports complex, there's temporary lighting there, so making sure, especially with it being right next to Basona, that there are responsible outdoor lighting practices there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions for you, so thank you, Ms. Pendleton, for sharing with us and reminding us. I know you've spoke to us before, but reminding us about this issue and the details. Thank you. Next up, Catherine Summers.
Good evening, Council. I just wanted to bring your attention to 3 happenings in Los Gatos right now. The first was sort of mentioned earlier. The senior committee has met a couple of times, and I am a member on that outreach communication subcommittee, and we are hosting a reception tomorrow night at the Adult Recreation Center. We're transforming the main room there into what will be known tomorrow night as the ARC Bar. And we have invited all seniors, older adults in our community, to come down to celebrate the fact that we have finished our outreach and have the results of the survey, and just really want to let people know that we are well on our way to making changes with our senior programs. Second, we do have a wine walk scheduled for this coming Saturday in Los Gatos. It's our annual spring wine walk. We expect quite a lot of people, which is great. Everyone's coming back out. We have more than 30 wineries participating, and that then involves 30 merchants and restaurants who will also be participating. So it's a really great event. Hope to see you there. And then lastly, many of you have probably seen as you're driving down Winchester and crosses over to North Santa Cruz, that there's some construction going on at Double D's, and they are building a big pergola, so they will have outdoor seating there as well. There was a small group of us, unrelated really to the chamber, although the chamber board is in support of it, of course, but we met with Dean and Darren and looked at that gateway right there and worked closely with Joey McCarthy, who built the wall on the one side in front of Out of the Barrel. And we really envisioned that it would be nice to have a wall that would mirror it on the other side. So we have launched a fundraiser whereby people can donate, and for $1,000 or more of a donation, you will have your name listed on a plaque on that gateway project, is what we're calling it. So hopefully when you go by, you can see it. There's a QR code there. I don't have one that I can share with everybody tonight. We need about $40,000 for the project. I'm excited to say that we're more than halfway there. But I really, the Dean and Darren and Double D's has been a longstanding institution here, and they're doing all that outdoor dining. And I think we always talk about gateway entrances to town, and that's a really good one. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Summers. I don't see any questions for you. I will give you my appreciation for taking on this gateway project, because I think it will look nice to have some symmetry there, but it's difficult for the town to kind of require that or organize it. So I really appreciate it when, citizens that are concerned about, how the town looks get involved and help solve the problem. So thank you. Let's see, I do have another hand, Joanne Rogers.
Good evening. I have a recording of a friend who lived in Los Gatos, and she wanted me to share this with you. If you could bear with me for a minute.
about marijuana at the age of 14 from a friend's brother who had a med card, who was a senior at Rock Canyon High School. He got his own med card at 18, unbeknownst to us. We found the registry login on his computer after he died. Johnny had no mental or physical conditions prior to using marijuana, and his primary care doctor confirmed they were not consulted. These products were not available to my child in my home and were not allowed in any fashion. These products have no smell and are easy to hide. As a result of THC, Johnny almost flunked his last semester of high school. He stole our family dog from our home and threatened to kill it if we didn't give him money. He had 3 mental hospital stays, outpatient programs, therapists, psychiatrists, medications, and a suicide attempt before a psychotic break at the age of 19. The diagnosis from the doctor at the mental hospital was THC abuse severe. 3 days before he died during dinner at our home, Johnny said, "I just want you to know you were right. You said marijuana would hurt my brain. Marijuana has ruined my mind and my life, and I'm sorry. I love you." He jumped off the top of the RTD garage at Lincoln Station 3 days later. We recovered his journals after his death, and he wrote that the mob was after him and his university was actually an FBI base. I'm very angry at the criminal potshop doctor who gave my perfectly healthy son a med card so his mind could be so damaged. My son was not depressed, abused, neglected, or self-medicating. He just wanted to get high with the rest of his friends because they were told it was legal, so it must be safe. He became paranoid, delusional, and suicidal from being addicted to this toxic THC poison and could not stop. Today's 18-year-old seniors with med cards are selling it to the younger children here. I know because I have my son's phone with his photos on Snapchat doing just that. Johnny was not a criminal. He should not have been able to access these psychotropic drugs in the first place. He was a victim of the predatory addiction for profit marijuana industry. I'm so sad we lived in Colorado during this vulnerable age where he had easy access to these products. Please do all you can to save our young people from the dangers of today's potent marijuana products, or many teens will continue to follow Johnny's path to suicide. If it hadn't been for marijuana, Johnny would still be here today.
Ms. Rogers, you have a question. Councilmember Badami.
Ms. Rogers, thank you for sharing the recording. I found it very sad. I believe I put my hand up prior to the question I wanted to ask you, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. Was the son of your friend on the recording, was he a student at Los Gatos High School, or did I get it at the end that he was in Colorado?
They moved to Colorado, so he was not at Los Gatos High School at the time. They were former residents of Los Gatos, and she called me and told, because she knew I was involved with this and trying to prevent the marijuana dispensaries from coming to Los Gatos. And you know, Colorado has a big problem with that, and they had moved there.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate it.
Okay, I don't see any other hands or questions, so thank you, Ms. Rogers, for that message. And I don't see any more hands for verbal communication, so I'll go ahead and close verbal communications and come back to item number 12, which is hopefully to introduce a first reading of the ordinance amending Chapter 18, Article 3, entitled Minors and Related to Social Host Liability for Parties at which underage drinking and drug use occurs. And am I turning this over to Mr. Schultz?
Yes, that's correct. I'm the one that'll be doing it forward first. And good evening again, Council and Mayor. Let me find my notes on this. I have the correct notes. Hold on one second, please. So the town council adopted an ordinance in 1989 related to alcohol use by minors, also known as a social host ordinance. In November 2021, the town council directed the town attorney to work with the youth commission to update the social host ordinance and to add this item to the town council strategic priorities and ordinances. The town attorney's office has worked with the youth commission to revise our social host ordinance. The amendments to the social host ordinance expand and hold adults responsible for underage use of intoxicants. So in other words, our previous only dealt with alcohol, but this one will now deal with not only alcohol, but controlled substances and cannabis. And in the use of those items at their household, whether or not adults are present. The ordinance is designed to confront and mitigate the prevalent problems of underage use of intoxicants at private and public venues. It allows law enforcement officials to issue citations for civil fines and fees against people responsible for gatherings at which intoxicants are served to or consumed by or in the possession of minors. The fines were a discussion with the Youth Commission. Overall, my research and analysis showed the fines range from about $250 to up to $2,500 as much. My first draft had a much lower fine, but the Youth Commission actually wanted to increase it to make it more of a deterrent. So the fines listed are, for the first violation, it would be $1,500, and for the second, it would be $3,000. I did some additional research and found them, though, in a couple of cities, primarily in the Southern California area, that also has social host ordinances that had them all the way up to as high as $7,500 for violations. So that's the report, and you'll open it up for public hearing and then deliberate, and recommend that you do a first reading by title only for the ordinance. And I'm available for any questions.
All right, let's start off with questions from Councilmember Sack.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Two questions. So the first violation, 1,500, second 3,000. So assuming there's a third and a fourth, would those stay at 3,000, or will those also escalate?
They would stay at 3,000, but we certainly could add a subsequent if you wanted that third more to go up. But right now, it would stay at 3,000 for any subsequent ones.
Okay. And my second question, I know when this was first introduced to council last year, our representatives at the local high school were in attendance and strong support. Just to confirm that there was correspondence with them, that they remain in full support?
Hopefully the town manager can answer that question. I didn't have any discussions with them, only with the youth commission and the police department.
Yes, thank you for the question. Our police chief was engaged with both our local elementary district and the high school district. They both sent emails to our chief, which she forwarded to me. They were very appreciative of the youth commission's work and very appreciative that this is before you this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, questions, Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. Mostly I had questions about some of the language. One is the terminology about that's used throughout, which is underage social gathering. It seems as though using that term without also saying where intoxicants are consumed by underage persons really could be read as any social gathering of underage folks, like a 6-year-old's birthday party. Now, I know that there's a definition section on it, but it just, in plain English, it does look, so I would just sort of ask, is that standard terminology in these ordinances? Because it does, in plain English, to me, it looks like it's not hitting the intended kind of activity.
So the ordinance, as with all ordinances we do, when I do my analysis and research, I gather many and take bits and pieces for all of them that will work with the town Los Gatos. In this case, you're all correct that yes, it can be confusing underage social gathering, but we do have it specifically defined as to what that means. And that's a party or gathering of two or more persons held on private or public property in the town where intoxicants are consumed by any underage person. So it requires there to be some type of intoxicants, alcohol, illegal drugs, or something else other than just the underage social gathering. But it's certainly something that I can look into as we go to the second reading and see if we can't clarify that, so there's no confusion that we're not just trying to prevent underage social gatherings.
Thank you. I had another question, if I may. It seems to be very absolute language about alcoholic beverages and doesn't quite seem like there's any reasonableness test in this ordinance. So if, for instance, there were a religious gathering and wine were consumed, or a Passover Seder where it's traditional to drink a cup of wine at different parts of the service. And there are cultures who consume wine that are, I just want to make sure there's no possibility of targeting some of these activities with legal action. So is there?
That's a good point, and I thought that we even had an exemption for that. If not, I could certainly put that in. That has that exemption. I don't see it in the definitions, but let me see if I can find it, because that was not the intent, and I remember seeing that type of exemption.
And I had one more question, that was the public property that's also included in the ordinance. Talk about prohibiting these activities on public property. How does that extend to those who are responsible for public property? How would that be enforced in a similar way that a homeowner or parent might be the subject of a civil?
So they would not be, unless they were somehow encouraging it or promoting it or allowing it to happen. An example would be that where I was trying to include in here that I've seen in some ordinances, if in fact the parents rent a limousine to go to prom and allow for, with their knowledge, knowing there's alcohol within that limousine, then you could hold them responsible even though they're not on their own private property. But if there's a gathering in a parking lot that the property owner has no idea that they're there and hasn't sanctioned it or promoted it, or then of course we wouldn't be able to hold them responsible.
Thank you.
Councilmember Badami.
So I understand the ordinance is designed to confront and mitigate underage use of intoxicants at private and public venues. So I'm all for that. But I'm questioning how a fine mitigates the problem, because in Los Gatos, the fine might be a drop in the bucket, if you will. So do we have any data to know how effective the ordinance is in other municipalities?
No, I don't. I can tell you, though, the cities that have a much higher amount correlates to the social economics of that town. Palos Verdes, Thousand Oaks. Obviously, I think that the fine is higher in the areas where the social demographics is higher also in economic status. So no, I don't have any that does. You could also put a criminal section in here as opposed to just civil. That might do more of a deterrent, but I find it very difficult to prosecute anything right now with the way the state is moving towards prosecution of crimes. So I think that would even be less of a slap. You'd probably get an infraction for a criminal sentence and get a $50 fine.
Okay, and how will people know what the fine is as a deterrent? I mean, we all know if we park in a handicap spot, it's going to be a pretty expensive parking ticket. So maybe we don't want to do that. And you hope that we don't want to do that anyway. Or even getting a ticket in the carpool lane when you're not in a carpool with another, occupant in the car. But I'm just questioning, I'm glad to have this, but I just question the effectiveness overall.
Good questions. We would hopefully do the outreach by social media. We could do some outreach with the Youth Commission. Hopefully the schools could somehow, provide in their newsletter to their parents of this change in the fines amounts so that we can get the word out that, yes, it's much more difficult to throw these parties without some consequences.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hudis, more questions?
More question is, about the outreach. I know when we discussed this before, and I know Councilmember Sayoc, I believe, brought this up about the need for education of not just students, but parents who maybe are unaware of some of the things that are actually happening that leads to this. And so I'm definitely supportive of the ordinance, but it seems like, bringing down the hammer without also doing the outreach and education might not be the right approach for implementing this. We really ought to implement these things in concert with the school district and communications and outreach to parents as this ordinance comes into play. So my question would be, are there opportunities for us to coordinate and really have a strong education and outreach program on the severity of this issue and what the town and parents can do about it?
Yeah, and certainly we can try to do that as much as we possibly can. You could have a delay on when it would be implemented, like we did with, let's say, the smoking ordinance or other ordinances that we've done. So there's ways, if you're concerned about making certain that the public knows about this before it be heavy-handedly enforced, certainly we can do that.
In addition, if I may, Mayor, we have very close working relationships with our school districts. So depending upon the action tonight, I'm happy to reach out to our local superintendents and let them know the status of this particular ordinance, and we'll be happy to work with them on education campaigns. We'll also be happy to use town social media to also promote this as an ordinance. We have a few thousand people on our What's New list. And so that is a good way of reaching out to our public as well. So we're happy to partner, and it looks like our chief has some additional ideas. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to add, in terms of the community outreach efforts, there has been conversation at the recent Youth Commission meeting, and we're going to be bringing a copy of this ordinance to the Spring into Green event. They will have a booth there, and they will have a copy of that, as well as information and facts to be able to inform the community. So they've already had that conversation. I have been in contact with both superintendents, and they're in full support of this ordinance, and they have even offered to, once whatever direction is provided here tonight, to provide that information to all of their outreach groups as well. And we have had a conversation about also placing it on our social media to educate the public from that viewpoint too. Thank you.
Councilmember Badami, more questions?
I have a question. I was going to move to make a motion, but I think we need to take public comment.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the questions to end. So I will go ahead and open it up for public comment at this time. Would the chair of our youth commission, Sasha Balasingham, like to address us? I don't see any hands yet, but I know there was some desire. There's Sasha. Okay.
Good evening, Council. I am speaking on behalf of the Youth Commission. Thank you so much for giving us the time to speak tonight. As a part of the Youth Commission, we strongly believe and support in the passing of this ordinance. Across our high schools, we have several clubs and missions to help the youth be as safe as possible when holding these parties. For example, we have a program at Los Gatos called Safe Rides to provide safe rides for youth who may be under the influence of drugs or alcohol at parties. Similarly, the main purpose of many of these clubs is to create a safe environment for our students of Los Gatos. In conjunction with many of these programs, we want to create a safer community for our students and youth, which are an invaluable part of our town through this ordinance. Whatever the cause or way it may have started, it gives the youth and parents an outlet to be accountable and to help avoid situations that can be much more deadly and dangerous, such as drinking and driving. We saw the need for this ordinance to be updated as it gives us all an avenue to be able to reach out if there is a party out of hand. Thank you for considering this.
All right, thank you. I guess next we'd like to have the Vice Chair of the Youth Commission, Quincy Scott.
Good evening, Council. Sasha did a pretty good job explaining why the Youth Commission is in support of this ordinance, but I'd just like to add on that we as the Youth Commission recognize that there is a high amount of drug and alcohol use all around in today's society, especially in our own community and around the Bay Area as a whole. And we just wanted to support the different ways that we can provide a safer outlet for both parents and students during these situations. And we think that this ordinance would be a great job at addressing this problem.
All right, thank you. And so next we'd like to hear from our subcommittee chair of the Youth Commission, Esha Bagora.
Yes, thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. I just wanted to add that the Youth Commission enthusiastically supports this ordinance. And in terms of outreach, we will be creating an outreach team and launching a fact sheet within our community so that everyone is aware of the update to this ordinance.
Great, thank you. I don't see any questions. Would anybody else wish to speak on this item from the public? Lee Fago.
Good evening. I'm very encouraged with this ordinance. I think it is timely, it's needed, and I salute the Youth Commission for their leadership in this project and the consistency that they've demonstrated in moving this forward in order to protect our community, themselves, and the next generation coming in. I'm going to suggest that we look again at what the fines should be. And the point was made a little earlier that the first offense amount may not be high enough to really be a deterrent in this community. And I'm going to suggest that we start with something on the order of maybe $3,500 to make it a meaningful message to the community that we don't want our youth in a risky situation due to adults allowing these controlled substances to be, the alcohol to be consumed where they have responsibility to control it. So I'm going to suggest that we raise the bar financially, and let's put some meaningful amounts in the first, second, and third offense to get the message out there so that it's a deterrent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mr. Fago. Mr. Schultz, would you like to make comments now or wait till I finish?
I'll wait till the public comment, and then I've got one just on
okay.
Potential addition.
So next, let's go with Joanne Rogers.
Good evening again. I really do salute the Youth Commission on this ordinance. I think it shows that they are paying attention to what's going on in our town. And I hope that this also applies to drug use, such as marijuana. And I think that they're on top of it. They see what's happening in our schools. And that is really why we don't want to normalize having marijuana dispensaries in our town. It just sends the wrong message. And congratulations to the Youth Commission. Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. I don't see any more hands. So I will close the public testimony and come back to Mr. Schultz.
So before you begin your deliberations, based on Councilmember Hudis's comment about the exemption, I somehow missed that. And so I found my previous draft of it and it was in that. But I would suggest it in your motion to approve this, if you do, that we add a section that just is exceptions and says this chapter does not apply to conduct involving the use of intoxicants that is protected by Article 1, Section 4 of the California Constitution, which is that freedom of religion clause.
Okay, more questions, motion, discussion from council members. Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you. I'm definitely going to move to approve this. When I was looking at it, one of the things that also struck me was the fine structure. And I had written to Mr. Schultz earlier, can't remember if it was yesterday or today, asking about whether we were restricted or whether the fine had to relate to cost recovery, and it doesn't. And he gave me a good explanation about, various communities and what's been done. If the fee is too high, it could potentially be appealed. Looking through all of this, the reason we were revisiting our social host ordinance is because the school district came to us and asked for this. We know that we have problems in our community, and I like the expansion of this to go from alcohol to all intoxicants. Nobody under 21 should be using any illegal or legal drugs. And so I think this hits a lot of the notes. I think the Youth Commission did a really good job looking through this and raising the fines from what was originally proposed to what's here. One of the things I would like to do is have the opportunity to have this ordinance come back to us in a year to see, are fines, are parties being stopped, are fines being assessed? How often are we seeing second fines? Or are there third cases, or is this just very effective? And, I think at this point, I'm comfortable with these fines. I have no idea what it would take to get somebody to knowingly, or in what I'm thinking is potentially there are parents who basically don't want to know. So they go out for the evening and let something happen at their home. So I think just the knowledge that whether you're home or not, you're responsible for what's happening in your home. And I think through our social media, and because the school districts are on board with this and they get the information out to the parents, just that information alone may help control this issue. And so, I'm quite comfortable with the fine levels for start, and I would just like to reassess it. So I'll let Councilmember Sayak weigh in, but I'm pretty happy with the way it stands right now.
Councilmember Sayak.
Oh, I was ready to second a motion, but I'm quite comfortable as well. I think, as Vice Mayor Risto said, the high school really would like the ability to promote this. I think many in the community are not even aware that there's such a host, that there's such a mechanism. And as we've discussed at the last meeting, education is a big part of the campaign that the high school would like to do in conjunction with the town. They are our children, and so it's not just a high school responsibility. So I encourage us to stick with this. I like the idea of looking at it in a year, and encourage Town Manager Provetti to continue working with both the high school and middle school principals to ensure that any campaign that is undertaken is done together, and any other assistance we can do to help mitigate this from exacerbating, and for people to really realize that we take this quite seriously. So Vice Mayor Risto, did you want to make the motion, or I'm happy to do it since I'm already unmiked?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'll move that we move the introduction and first reading of an ordinance contained in attachment 1 with the language that Attorney Schultz recommended that included the exemption for the freedom of religion clause. His exact language actually was stated, and if we could just catch that from the transcript, and that this will amend Chapter 18, Article 3, entitled Minors and Related to Social Host Liability for Parties at which underage drinking and drug use occurs. And in addition to this, ask our town staff to work closely with the principals of both schools, actually, with all of our schools in Los Gatos, so that this is made aware to all of our families that this is something that we intend to use and that this is something that we take seriously. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. I have a motion. Vice Mayor Risto.
I'd like to second it. I'd also like to ask that in addition to getting feedback from the school districts, also with the police department, and see what kind of outreach and what kind of reactions we get to that. And I do think it's important to do outreach to all the school districts. It's not just high school, it can be middle school. And I believe we have 5 school districts in town. So let's make sure that they can promote to all of their families what's being done to protect their children, our children, and what their responsibilities are. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? I don't see any, so I'll go ahead and call the question. Vice Mayor Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Sack.
Yes.
Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes.
Aye, and I would just add that I'm glad we reached this milestones. I'm supportive of us reviewing in a year, and to remind us that the real target of this communication are the adults, and that somehow through the schools we need to reach the adults, and this should also include the private schools in town as well as the public school district. So somehow we need to figure out how to do that.
Okay, and the mayor votes yes, so it passes unanimously. If I could ask the clerk to read the ordinance by title only, please.
Thank you. An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos, amending Chapter 18, Article 3, minors related to social host liability for parties at which underage drinking and drug use occurs.
Okay, thank you. So I'll close item number 12 and move on to item number 13, which is introduction and first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 29 of the Los Gatos Code regulating tree ordinance. And Mr. Schultz is up again.
Yes, I am. Good evening again. In 2015, the Town Council adopted our tree protection ordinance. The intent of the tree protection ordinance is to regulate the removal of trees within the town to retain as many trees as possible, consistent with the purpose of the ordinance and the reasonable use of private property. The provisions of the ordinance require that anyone seeking to remove a tree or prune a tree, a protected tree as defined in the ordinance, must obtain a permit. The ordinance outlines review criteria to be applied to applications for tree removal. The ordinance also includes a penalty section for violation of the tree protection ordinance. Based on staff's experience in implementing the tree ordinance for the past 7 years, staff proposes minor revisions to the ordinance to provide clarity within the chapter related primarily to fines and penalties and some other issues that have come up over the last 7 years. On March 23rd, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on the draft revisions and made additional modifications after hearing public comment and deliberating on the draft ordinance. The proposed modifications by the Planning Commission have been incorporated into the proposed code revisions. It is recommended the Town Council move for introduction and first reading of the ordinance by title only, amending Chapter 29 of the Los Gatos Code related to tree protection. And that ends my report, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions before I go to public comment? I don't see any, so let's start off with Juliana Pendleton, please.
Good evening. This is Juliana Pendleton from the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society again. All across the Bay Area, we are losing our tree canopy, which consequently increases the urban heat island effect and hurts urban ecology. The San Francisco Estuary Institute has found that urban centers will be critical in our fight to preserve biodiversity, because our current protected lands and waters will not be enough to stop our drastic loss of biodiversity. Deciding which trees to plant and where is incredibly important. Planting native trees with high habitat value will help restore native habitat and increase local biodiversity. Within the ordinance, please consider adding language to ensure that at least 80% of all trees planted in Los Gatos are native. Recently, I have noticed seemingly healthy trees being cut down along Los Gatos Boulevard between the stretch from the Valero gas station to the Highway 9 intersection. As Council revisits our town's tree protection ordinance, please include assurances and enforcements that if trees are removed, more will be replanted. In the short term, young trees cannot make up for the loss of mature trees, but planting more native trees with high habitat value will help in the long term. Additionally, there needs to be clarification on who will be maintaining the trees, because planting new trees that then die or are unhealthy in 3 to 5 years does not benefit the environment or our community. Finally, we are experiencing historic droughts and increasingly hot temperatures. Whenever we implement water conservation measures, please make sure that town trees are still watered adequately. We need our trees if we are going to adapt to climate change and solve our biodiversity crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pendleton. I don't see any questions. So let's go to Dr. Weissman.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Since 2001, I've been involved in 3 major rewrites of the tree protection ordinance. Each occasion has been after major violations of the then current tree protection ordinance and in response to ineffective enforcement or to what the town attorney felt was unclear authority for him to respond to such infractions. At their March 23rd meeting, the Planning Commission expressed several concerns about the language in the current revision. As detailed in my letter in your packet, attachment 2, page 113, all of those concerns have now been addressed in the revised draft before you. I see little reason to repeat what's in my letter or in the draft, but I'm happy to try to answer any further questions or concerns that you may have. If any council member continues to have issues with this draft, I would appreciate the opportunity to address those issues during the public comment period of this hearing. Thank you, and I recommend that you approve this draft tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Weissman. You have a question from Councilmember Hudes.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your continued work on this. And I know this needs to be a continuous look because there will be a new way to get around it every time we try to do something here. I know that you wrote a response to the Planning Commission, and it did seem as though some of the questions from the Planning Commission either demonstrated not a lot of knowledge of this particular issue. Are there any things that you wanted to highlight from that letter in terms of what the public should know about the changes that have been made in this current draft?
Yes. My point number 3 in my letter was a lot of the commissioners were concerned about how do we let the public know that there have been new changes. And this, of course, without education, I think changes in the law are not as effective. Certainly, people come in for permits to build houses, to add on to houses, to do various other things. And I was, and then also any tree pruning company that works within the town has to have a permit from the town, has to be registered. Yet, as I say in point 3, Jita Angvari has actually said that there is no education and no outreach extended to tree pruning companies when they come into the town to get the permit. And that's the obvious time to let these people know what the law is. I think a lot of tree companies come into town and figure, well, if a homeowner has asked me to trim this tree or take out this tree, they know what the law is, they've followed it, they've gotten the permits. And that is not always the case, either intentionally or unintentionally. And I think this is the point where we need to interact, where the town needs to interact with the public and let them know that if they break the law, not only is the homeowner, the property owner responsible, but they are also at risk of having their license suspended for a year, certainly on the second violation.
Thank you. Thank you for your response, and thank you for your focus on this.
My pleasure.
All right, I don't see any more questions for Dr. Weissman. Thank you, Dr. Weissman, for all your work on this. Would anybody else from the public wish to address us? I not seen any hands, so I'll close public comment and come back to council for a motion or more questions, comments. Councilmember Hudis.
There's a clause in there about the homeowner or the successor. I just wanted to ask the town attorney, how enforceable is that? And it says, well, the applicant or their successors will be responsible under section D. Is that enforceable?
Rob, I think you might be on mute.
I'm sorry. What section of D were you referring to? So I can take a look at the language. Is it has to do with replacement of trees? Is it to deal with trees that have been damaged?
Don't see the page number of the report. Sorry about that. It is the page number of the staff report is 103, if that helps.
I'm just referring to which section of the ordinance is it?
It looks like it's section 2910-1000, new property development, and then under D.
There we go. Okay. So I think there's ways that we could hold the next property owner, depending on where they are in the development process. Certainly, if they haven't completed the project, then yes, because it can be part of the conditions that we could include into it. Where it would be difficult is if a new property owner comes in and there's nothing on that shows up on title about anything, then obviously they would have no notice of the issue. So it's kind of a mixed bag. It certainly helps us to, at least to try to get that compliance by any new owners, but in certain circumstances, it might be difficult to do.
I think it's important because sometimes a project is approved or it takes a very long time, particularly a large one, and it ends up that somebody else actually does the development. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, and if it's the 5-year period, yes, we can certainly put those as like we do for our deed restrictions for color or other issues. We could include that as part of the conditions that make certain that if the home is sold, they're aware of this condition to maintain the trees for the 5 years.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you. I have a question for the town attorney. Ms. Pendleton brought up trying to require 80% native trees. And when I was looking at the replacement policy, if a native tree is removed, then it has to be replaced with natives, but we don't require that for other types of trees. Is this something that would be possible? I want to pass this ordinance tonight. So if this is something else we would have to look at that would make it more complicated, we can not make that part of it. But how difficult would it be, or how much would it change it to say that we'd want to be promoting native trees when we're replanting?
My understanding is we're pretty much always requiring native trees to be planted regardless. Sure, Mr. Weissman even knows better than I do, or maybe Joel Paulson does on those requirements.
Okay, because in there it does say that if a native is removed, it has to be replaced with a native. It's a non-native. It's up to the discretion of the director.
And then I think in the hillside, though, it says that it has to be replaced with a native regardless, as I recall.
Mr. Paulson, did you want to jump in here?
Thank you, Mayor. I can. That's correct. So the hillside development standards and guidelines do have requirements for native species. There is a zone which is within 30 feet of the home, typically, where ornamental plants can be planted. We are still typically looking for some type of native ornamental, but that is an option. In the flatlands, Parks and Public Works actually has a tree replacement list. So if folks want suggestions, what we'll do is we'll work with Parks and Public Works and the town arborist to see how many of those trees on that list are actually native, and then we can look at potentially revisiting that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Councilmember Badami.
Yes, I would just like to comment, in particular, a big thank you to Dr. Weissman for persevering for 21 years to get this accomplished so that we could be here tonight to review this. He came before us in the Planning Commission while I was on it for a period of 7 years and did his best to save several trees. So he's obviously put a lot of time and effort into that. So kudos to him, a big thank you. And I would be fully in support of approving this ordinance.
Councilmember Hudis.
Yes, I would be prepared to make a motion if that's okay.
Go ahead. I think we're ready for one.
Okay, so I move to introduce and first reading of this ordinance in attachment 1 by title only, amending chapter 29 of the Los Gatos Town Code regulating tree protection.
Councilmember Badami.
I second it wholeheartedly.
Okay, any further comment from council members? Don't see any. I'll call the question. Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Councilmember Sayak.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudis.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. It passes unanimously. And if I could ask Ms. Neese to read the title, the ordinance by title only.
Thank you. An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos, amending Chapter 29 of the Los Gatos Town Code regulating tree protection.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close item 13, move on to item 14, which is also another ordinance introduced and first reading of an ordinance amending the Los Gatos Town Code, Chapter 15, regarding motor vehicles and traffic to include parking meter zones and amending ordinance definitions and requirements. And am I turning this over to Sergeant Bormeo?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Try to assist Mr. Schultz tonight a little bit. Evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Town Council. The staff report before you is an introduction for first reading and ordinance amendment to the Los Gatos Town Code Chapter 15 regarding motor vehicle and traffic. The amendment would provide inclusion of parking meter zones and amending ordinance definitions and requirements. On March 15th, the Town Council received an update on the progress of the downtown parking pilot, and at that time was directed staff to move forward developing this pay-to-stay parking ordinance, which will focus on allowing that park once approach and be able to initiate a parking fee beyond the initial time frame regarding it being on street, which is 2 hours, or off street, which is 3 hours. The California Vehicle Code section 22508 requires local authorities to adopt an ordinance when establishing parking meter zones and setting rates for parking meter fees. The goals overall was to provide convenient park once for visitor parking and establish these pay-to-stay parking zones. The downtown parking meter zones are outlined in the staff report and essentially have a northern limit of Highway 9, an eastern limit of Highway 17, and an essentially western limit of Tate Avenue to about Broadway and then to about the on-ramp of Highway 17. There's also the inclusion for further consideration along Main Street and some of the side streets in addition to that. The downtown parking meter fee range, which would provide council some flexibility in making decisions, is recommended between $0 and $5 per hour and can be adjusted necessary to control the demand for parking. In order to understand that demand, town staff will do space utilization and review periodically in order to make sure that we are being consistent with enforcement downtown, and those rates can be set by the town council. As a part of our community outreach, with the assistance of Economic Vitality, we met with the Chamber of Commerce on April 12th. Some of the highlights during those conversations was existing timeframe continuation, which is 2 hours for on-street, which is anything that is along the public roadway, 3 hours for off-street, which if we imagine any of our public parking lots or municipal lots, and favored a $2 fee for anything after the initial free periods that were outlined. Town staff's recommending using the revenue from this project to continue and maintain the pay-to-stay program, along with directly relating parking or alternative transportation to the downtown parking meter zone. And that concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Sergeant. Any questions to start? Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you, Sergeant Barromeo. One of the things I was looking at is, I guess I want some clarification. The parking meter zone covering street parking, my understanding is the only thing we've ever talked about for pay to stay are the municipal lots. So I guess my guess would be, are we just describing a larger area so that in the future, if we change our minds or we want to add pay to stay in other regions, that's just already taken care of?
Thank you for the question, Vice Mayor. That is correct. So the focus on widening it to some of the on-street parking, specifically along that Main Street corridor, was in the event that we wanted to explore that further, that was already included in the ordinance. And then we can have that discussion with council as we start implementing some of these phases to see if there's any shifts within the parking downtown.
Okay, thank you. So then I understand. Okay, that makes sense. So the ordinance covers a wider range of pay per hour and a wider area of pay to stay than what we've been talking about, but that just gives us latitude as we move on, correct?
Correct. And the primary focus is still on the off-street municipal parking lots as we really focus on that employee parking pilot.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, let me go to the public, see if any members of the public wish to speak on this item. Okay, Randy Chen.
Hi, Randy Chen, Los Gatos Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to follow up on what Maria started to mention, was that in the Dixon report and in many subsequent meetings since, we have always talked about North Santa Cruz and Main Street in front of the businesses to be a 30-minute parking zone so that customers could quickly and easily go in and get one errand done and leave, and then leave it for someone else. Whereas if you were going to come and shop or do a couple of errands, then you would go in the parking lots and park longer. And in that, so I just want to make sure that that's still in the front of our minds, that we have, for the last 2 years since the Dixon report talked about 30 minutes on North Santa Cruz and Main Street, so that people could do that, and that wouldn't be part of the pay to stay. You could only park for 30 minutes. And although I missed our meeting last week because I was on vacation, I'm told it was a very successful meeting. Thank you, Monica and Officer Rennell and Officer Borromeo. About 15 to 20 people came, and I believe what I'm told is that only one person suggested 2 hours on North Santa Cruz. So that's it, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. I don't see any questions for you. Would any other members of the public wish to speak? Not seeing any, I'll close public comment, come back to council for a motion on this one. Vice Mayor Risto.
First of all, I wanted to give a disclosure. I did attend the parking meeting at the chamber, and the discussion did center around 30-minute parking. So I think for on the street, what Dixon report stated, and I think what we've wanted all along, is that Santa Cruz Avenue should be for that one errand, quick turn. Those spaces are always available. There were a couple of shop owners there that talked about they didn't necessarily want loading zones, but with 30-minute quick turn, they would be able to pull up in front of their store, unload things, and then go park in their employee parking or whatever. So I personally really want to make sure that we preserve that fast turnover. I think if we had 2-hour parking on the street and 3-hour parking in the lot, it gets a little murky. And the other thing is having 30-minute parking on Santa Cruz Avenue would really stop employees from doing the shuffle. You're not going to park there for 30 minutes and move again. So that is one thing I want to make sure is memorialized in this, that we don't go to 2-hour parking on Santa Cruz Avenue, that we maintain that 30-minute.
Is there a question there, or that's just a statement?
That's just a statement.
Okay. Other comments, questions from council members? Vice Mayor, would you like to make a motion?
I would. Now that I'm coming to my senses and realizing that if we pass this ordinance, we can implement it however we need to. We just need it as wide as possible. I was starting to get hung up on details, and that's actually not what we need. So this is item 14. So I move to approve and go to the first reading of an ordinance, attachment 1, amending the Los Gatos Town Code Chapter 15 regarding motor vehicles and traffic to include parking meter zones and amending ordinance definitions and requirements.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hudes.
I'll second the motion, and I'm glad that we are able to make a step forward in this important area. And in addition to town staff that has been working on this for some time, I also want to thank the Vice Mayor for her attention to this and her commitment to implementing the recommendations that came out of the community. This is not an easy thing to do. And I think the theme of our evening items tonight has been outreach and communications. And we'll, I think, be talking about that in our next item as well. The one area where we don't get direct verbal feedback is from visitors. And, you know, when they come to town and if they don't find parking, they're going to move on, and they're not going to be happy about their Los Gatos experience. So I think the wayfinding element of this, the signs, is a start, but I really think we need to be focused on how do we fund the real wayfinding that will come with electronic direction as well. I am, as I've said before, worried about that. I know it's expensive, but I think that it was part of the phase 1, and that we need to continue to find a way to make sure that our retail businesses can recover from the pandemic and can and that their customers can find a way to park, because they're most likely not going to be pedestrians initially. They're probably going to come in on cars, and we have to find a way to deal with that. So just a few comments, but I'm very supportive of us taking the next step.
And that was a second also, correct?
Yes, I started.
Okay. Any further comments on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. So Councilmember Hudes?
Aye.
Councilmember Sayak?
Aye.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Aye.
Mayor votes aye, so it passes unanimously. And if I could ask Ms. Neese to read the ordinance by title only, please.
Thank you. An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos to amend Chapter 15 relating to motor vehicles and traffic to include pay-to-stay parking meter zones and amending sections conflicting with ordinance definitions and requirements.
All right, thank you. So our next item, 15, I think might take a little bit of time, and usually we take a break at 9 o'clock. So we're a little before 9, but I think we should probably go ahead and take a break now. Let's, do you want 5 minutes or longer? 5 minutes, good? 10 minutes, okay. So let's come back at 9 o'clock. I assume so the item 15 is a discussion about providing direction on community engagement efforts for the general plan and housing element updates. So as a reminder, we're not going to be discussing the housing element or the general plan. We're going to be talking about what kind of outreach efforts we want to make. I'll turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. Jennifer Armour, Planning Manager. The item before you this evening is in response to Council interest and is an opportunity to discuss community engagement efforts for the general plan and housing element. As you have seen in the written staff report, we've used a wide variety of tools for outreach to the community and will continue to do so, but also recognize the importance of flexibility and adaptability and always welcome additional suggestions for outreach options. So this concludes staff's presentation, but we would be happy to answer any questions.
All right, I'll have Councilmember Badami.
Yeah, I have a question for staff, and it's why are we doing this now? I mean, we're pretty far along in the process. GPAC started 2.5 years ago, and we have a second planning commission meeting on Monday night. So how did this come tonight to engage in outreach and further community engagement at this stage in the game?
Thank you, Council Member. This was specifically requested by one of the members of the council for discussion this evening. We did actually include, for example, as part of the RFQ, when we initially went out to find a consultant for the general plan update process 4 years ago, we did include a component of public engagement as an important part of this. And throughout the entire process, we have included, as you've seen in the report, a number of different outreach strategies, and have, as we have received comments and suggestions throughout the process from the public, from the council, and from others, we have implemented those as well. So we're here to listen and receive any suggestions you might have at this point, in addition to the outreach efforts we have already conducted.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I did put it on the agenda because a council member did mention to me concern, and you know, these are very important updates. So you know, there has been a communication plan all along, but you know, before we complete it, we want to give council a chance to weigh in to see if there's anything additional that we may want to do. Let me go to the public and see if anybody wishes to address us on this item. Doesn't look like there's anything. Any members of the public wishing to speak on this? So I'll close public comment and come back. So this item could be as simple as, you know, carry on as usual, or if you have, you know, additional thoughts, you know, please share them. Let's start with Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. And this was a question I believe that I asked before. In terms of when the general plan was being developed, how many unique or how many individuals actually participated in all of the workshops and meetings that were held? I had the impression that it was a fairly small number of people at a large number of meetings. Is that the case? And do we have any ability to tell how many residents actually participated during that stage?
Thank you, Council Member, for the question. We do have some numbers that we could pull together in terms of specific number of participants in those early engagement activities and community meetings, because we did take attendance at those meetings. However, what I would like to emphasize in terms of thinking of that early discussion when it is often difficult to get engagement from the community, to have them come and spend the time to talk about something that's a very abstract topic, is that we did have the full GPAC, a committed group of volunteers from the community who really dug into these topics to discuss them, and they listened to any public comment or input that they received and discussed it to try and provide some good recommendations to Planning Commission and Council on that. But as I said, if those numbers are something that you'd like to see when we do bring the Planning Commission's recommendation to you, I can look at pulling together those details for those initial community meetings.
Thank you.
Councilmember Badami?
Yes, I'd like to see those numbers because I'm looking at the fact that the GPAC, the first meeting started on October 30th of 2018 and commenced on May 6th of 2021. So during that time frame, I'd like to know what kind of outreach was done, because when I look at the staff report, it references all these outreach efforts, but there's only a couple of dates in there and they reference 2021. Well, that was far along into the GPAC process, if not after it had already recommended approval for the draft 2040 general plan. And for me as a council member, I became a member of GPAC towards the end. They had a total of 34 meetings. 3 were canceled. It would have been 37. And I got on during the last 7 meetings, and I was amazed, if not shocked, at the lack of public participation or comments that we had in drafting this plan. So it appeared to me that most of the input was provided by the 12 committee members. So I would be interested in getting more data on that. Thank you.
We can do that.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Thank you. I don't want to beat up our public, but, having participated in parking studies 30 years ago and participating in general plan meetings, the first time around, and doing housing element in 2014 and watching the North 40 move forward, I think it's human nature for people to not necessarily want to get involved in something that is going to be a multi-year process. And there are a hardcore group of residents who will do that. And I think that doesn't mean that we don't keep reaching out, but I think it's pretty typical on big issues for people to say, well, eventually it's going to get to the Planning Commission or the Town Council, and that's when I'll weigh in. And so I think we need to be particularly careful to make sure that if people show up for the first time, when things are in front of the Planning Commission or the Town Council, that, we're prepared to get that information. I think we have more ways to reach people than we used to. Not everybody reads the paper anymore. We've got social media. In some ways that makes it harder. But back when everybody was reading the paper, we didn't have huge turnout for any of these kinds of meetings either. So I'm constantly struggling with, I send out newsletters to my neighbors. We have just a neighborhood next door group, and I'll notify them of meetings, and they all bounce back with, well, tell me what happened. Or, every one of us as council members probably has our own social media or mailing lists or ways to reach people. And we've been asked as members of the GPAC to reach out to everybody. So I feel like, we're constantly trying to do this. I would love to know, are there other nearby communities that are going through a process like this that are getting more robust public, participation, and what are they doing differently, and what could we learn from that? Because, we still have a lot of time left. We still have a lot of meetings left on the housing element, and we have, even if people don't attend the meetings, we've got the Better Balance tool, and we want to make sure that people know about that and they're using it. So I would just be curious to know, I've talked to people I know on other councils in other cities, and I haven't gotten any different ideas than what we're doing. I think the farmers market is a great place to do outreach. I think the community groups, I know that it says, we've had presentations at 7 different community meetings, but maybe we need follow-up, getting Rotary and Kiwanis and every service group sending out messaging to their, if they have a newsletter or something, getting messaging out to their members, and then always asking people, don't just receive the message, share the message. But I'm not trying to be cynical. I think it's human nature not to want to attend those early meetings until people really understand the landscape of what they're dealing with. We know that people don't react until story polls go up. We don't have story polls for the general plan. And so, I want to thank staff for all of the hard work you're doing. And I want to encourage all of us to spread the information better. But then, to repeat myself, I'd like to ask our staff members, because I know that you talk to your colleagues in other cities, are there other cities with better public engagement?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. That's very true. And this is actually very common for a general plan update process or specific plan, that a lot of the engagement does happen at the end, especially once you get to the point where you have a draft plan, something for people to really look at and comment on, something that's kind of concrete and before them, even when it's a high level document like this. So this is quite common for this process, that we'll get some participation through the process, different voices joining us and sharing their comments, and then more participation at the end. And that is one of the things that we have been emphasizing through this last year, since the draft general plan was published last June, that there still is a lot of room for modifications. And we brought that to Planning Commission last week as well for their discussion and consideration, and they are in the middle of the process of considering all of the public comments that we've received and how to incorporate that into their recommendation to you. And then you will have an opportunity to discuss that further. So it is very common but that's also why we've been going to the farmers market, more than once a month since it came out, so that we really could continue to talk with people and share what's in there and how it connects to their concerns. You mentioned a number of community groups. All of those we have made presentations to: Kiwanis Club, Rotary, morning and afternoon, and a number of other community groups. We've gone to share this information with them and repeatedly do ask them to share it with their communities, as well as the religious organizations and schools who are in town. So we do try and spread that as much as possible. But as you said, it's difficult, especially with a high level document like this, to really connect with the community. I'm going to invite the community development director or the town manager, whether they've got anything more to add based on their experiences with previous general plan updates or in other communities.
Thank you, Ms. Arbor. So yes, being part of the last general plan update, this is not atypical. Obviously, we have a different set of circumstances with this general plan update with the increased housing numbers. So that has brought out a few more people than we typically would see. I think, obviously we're doing what we can to try to get the word out. Obviously, we try to get folks, including the council. We appreciate any time you're able to forward that information, and we look forward to continuing in that process and look forward to the discussion tonight. And if there are any other thoughts that council members have, then we're willing to look into those and see if those are something from a resource perspective that we can deal with. And then I will turn that over to Town Manager Privetti.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to the question about what do other cities do, and do they receive higher levels of input? We are following all of the best practices. The engagement tool on our website is really one of the newest innovations that has come along in recent years. And we've had engagement through that. I think what we've done is actually do more than what other cities have done. Attending the farmers market and having those one-on-one or two-on-one conversations with individuals really go far in terms of being able to have more depth of conversation than just a quick email back and forth or even a little Post-it note at a community meeting. So sometimes the numbers don't always tell the quality and the richness of the conversations that are happening. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah, yes.
Could I just follow up, because I had
Sure.
one thing that I did see in another community when I was in Truckee this summer and they were working on their general plan. They actually had sandwich boards all over their downtown and even in some of the more remote areas with a QR code on it. And that could be another way to catch people. So in terms of a concrete suggestion, that was the only one I came up with that we haven't been doing right now. I don't want to see bike lanes or sidewalks blocked, but if there's places where we could strategically place the sandwich board similar to the way that we're advertising Spring into Green, that way, if you have it on the trail, people might go, oh, how does the general plan impact the trail? Or have it near the North 40 or, along Los Gatos Boulevard, but all over town. I realize that's an investment in putting it out or something, but somehow getting something with a QR code that's in people's faces that they'll encounter accidentally as opposed to seeking out or being reached by someone would be my only suggestion.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I will add that we actually did have posters with a QR code in a number of locations in town early in the process. We haven't done that recently, and we can look into whether we do have the resources and the ability to do that at this point. But I did want to share that was something we actually included early on and in the poster form.
And I remember also in the beginning, you gave out stacks of what looked like little business cards that we could give to people also I think it had a QR code on it. So to attract people to the process.
That's correct. And at the farmers market, we continue to have those business cards with the QR code, as well as magnets that have the website on them so that people can take them home and remember to check in on how the process is going. And those information with the flyers, which also include the QR code that takes you to the website for the general plan in particular, is available at the library as well. For the housing element update process, we also have included a QR code when we sent out the postcards for the community meeting. So we are continuing to try and use that type of easy access when we do share this information with the community so that they can come and find more information.
Okay, Councilmember Hudes?
Yes, thank you. And I don't mean with any of this conversation to diminish the perception of the effort that's been made on the part of the GPAC members and particularly Ms. Arbor and Mr. Paulson to share information. I want to focus on sort of the other side of that, which is engagement isn't only pushing information out, it's also taking information in and responding to that. And that's, so if we could just maybe focus, my question really relates to the study sessions that we've had since the draft came out. There were a number of questions from residents, from the council. And my question is, why haven't the questions from residents and the staff answers to those questions been posted on the website or included even in the staff reports to the Planning Commission and Council? I know that there's a section in the current Planning Commission report. I'm not going to comment on it except to say that there's the answers to those questions that came from staff in meetings. I just don't see that and wonder why that side of engagement hasn't really taken place.
Thank you, Council Member. You did actually touch on what I was going to refer to, which was that when we did receive comments and direction from Town Council, it was specifically on information that we were expected to provide to Planning Commission as part of their deliberations, additional information that we were asked to provide to them so that it could be part of their discussion. And as you would have seen in the Planning Commission staff report, It does include all of the written public comments that we have received since the final meeting of the GPAC in May of 2021, as well as Exhibit 7, which went through any location where there were specific recommended changes to try and lay those out in a format that the Planning Commission could go through and consider whether those are changes that they're in support of and want to recommend to Town Council, and included in their comments from staff, whether there were particular concerns about any of those suggestions in terms of conflicts with other, the purpose or the control that the town has over, for example, state right-of-way or other issues, as well as those that we do fully support or are neutral on. So trying to provide that guidance. And as you said, there was additional information on the topics you requested that were included in that staff report.
Okay, Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Joel Paulson for pointing out that there are significant changes in the draft plan. For me, I think there's an expectation from the community that the 2020 general plan was working just fine, and as quoted by the prior town council, and going forward, there wouldn't be any major changes. Which could explain maybe the apathy or a certain comfort level from the community in not getting involved. Well, they're just starting to, because I think the word is spreading that this general plan contains radical changes that tell a different story. And for that, I cannot stress the importance to the community in understanding a new constitution for our town. So I would like to question, with some of the outreach that we've done, has there been any comparison levels for the community to understand the major changes in comparing the 2020 plan to the 2040, what's proposed in that? Because I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember. As part of the release of the draft 2040 general plan, as recommended by the GPAC, we did put together a newsletter that tried to put together a summary of what was in each of the chapters to help the community understand what topics are covered in this document, as well as describing what some of the more significant changes are that are within that, to lay out what's being proposed and what is changing. So for example, there is a whole page there that's talking about missing middle housing and the changes in some of the community place district, the use of community place districts and other details in the land use element, as well as what the new density standards are that are shown for those different designations. Since I know that that is one of the things that is of significant concern. And as the town manager pointed out, a lot of these conversations that we're having as part of the outreach really have had a lot of depth to helping talk through what some of the concerns are and give the background and the discussions that went into them to help the community, both those that we speak with and then those that they talk with, to have that depth of understanding of what those changes are and what they mean and where they came from, what the background discussions were.
Okay, so with that, what are we doing with the feedback with those significant changes? What are we doing with that, and what have we done with that along the way?
So I would say that, thank you, Councilmember, we have throughout the process, as we've received comments from the members of the public, the GPAC has taken those suggestions and incorporated a number of them throughout the process. So that's really been an integral part of their process. For example, including the references to plant-based eating, which I'm sure you all have seen letters in support of that. That got into policies within the draft 2040 general plan and is one of the potential changes being considered by the Planning Commission at their meeting to incorporate an implementation measure as well, as is suggested by the current comments. In the time between when we released the draft 2040 general plan last June and when that plan went to Planning Commission, there was an extended period of time where we were conducting the environmental review, putting that out for public comment. And during that period of time, we're not making any changes to that draft, but we have collected all public comments that have been received. And as I said, Exhibit 7 attached to the staff report for Planning Commission did include a summary of all of those suggested changes so that Planning Commission can consider those and make a recommendation to Town Council. You will then have access to all of those public comments. They are all available online through that staff report at this time. And we will continue to receive public comments and share them with Planning Commission and then with you once it is a recommendation for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Armour.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sapp.
Thanks. I'll be brief. I'm thinking of specific suggestions that haven't already been done, and this may have already happened, Ms. Armour, but has a draft or some talking points been shared by our staff liaisons to the various other commissions we have? I know oftentimes we look at them as ambassadors and representatives of their own niches within the community, and I'm wondering if there's an ability to share the general plan with them and they can then share with their own peer group. So.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, the commissions actually were integral to providing advice and guidance to the GPAC on their area of expertise. And that was very helpful, in particular on issues of historic and senior. Youth were all providing specific recommendations, and the GPAC welcomed those, having that level of expertise and experience to integrate there. I think it's a great idea that this is another opportunity for us to send that out through the liaisons again at this time to spread the word that this is being considered and discussed by Planning Commission, and then we'll be going to Town Council as well.
Okay, Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. I wanted to respond to one point that was brought up. So, the topic of what's changed, I think, is really important. And there was newsletter 4. I read it again recently. The thing that most impacted the town, I think, it has been the upzoning of every residential lot in Los Gatos, doubling or tripling the density. I don't understand why we didn't just state that. There was a table that was in there that showed the new densities, but it didn't show the old and the new, and it just wasn't clear. So I understand that some of these things are technical or difficult to understand, but I think the language needs to be absolutely clear about what is changing. There was a sentence there that said a number of other enhancements are included, and that just preceded that table. I just didn't get that it was really, maybe this was written by the consultants who were maybe pro-development, who've been drafted to do some of this work, but it wasn't clearly saying, what's changed. So I wanted to emphasize that I think sending information and pushing information to our residents is important, and I'm glad to see that it's increased, but I don't really think that's engagement. And, the staff report itself says that effective public engagement program also includes flexibility and adaptability. And I take that to mean that the feedback will be incorporated in some way. And I haven't seen a lot of flexibility or things that have been adapted since the general plan draft was released. And I think it starts by answering the questions that have come from our residents, the Planning Commission, and the council. So, we had 2 study sessions after the release of the plan, but only some of our residents' questions were answered, and they were answered briefly. And I think the mayor told the public that, that staff will respond to individual comments as a collective, but I couldn't find this really ever happening. And certainly the general plan website doesn't reflect the answers, nor does the staff report include those questions and answers. And there are no summary minutes, so I watched the 3-hour and 14-minute video again earlier today. And as far as I can tell, there's still not an answer to some of the questions that I raised. I remember asking, do we know whether any other communities are exceeding their RENA allocation to the degree that Los Gatos is? The 3904 versus the 1993. I didn't see, again, a clear answer to those questions. So I actually would like to make a motion about one in one confined area that I think would be important to this, and that is, to address that outreach it is important, but engagement is also important, and the answers to questions are important. So I would move that we post the questions and answers from the 2 study sessions that occurred after the GPAC adopted the draft plan last June, plus any questions and answers that arise from the housing element study sessions, and provide this information to the Housing Element Advisory Board, the Planning Commission, and Council in the format of question and answer from staff. So I actually wanted to make a motion to address that specifically.
Okay. Councilmember Badami. You're still muted.
I'm sorry, I'll second it.
Okay. Councilmember Sayah.
If I could just have more information. So questions that arise from our study sessions, and then answers, and then where would that be posted, and where, I guess I'm assuming that questions are being answered, but if you could just, if the maker of the motion could just explain how you envision this?
Sure. There's a frequently asked questions page on the 2040 General Plan website. It could go into there. That's what I mean by posted, is to do that. Like there's a newsletter on there, and there are other summaries of meetings and pointers to various meetings. So as residents have a way to be engaged in this, is to see that their questions were answered. The ones that came up in the study session. It's not like there were hundreds of them. There were, I would guess there were probably about 20. And then the other thing is providing that information. I would suggest that that Q&A be provided to the Planning Commission and to the Council as we consider that item. And then I think there was also a Housing Element Advisory Board study session just recently. And if there are any others, that be handled in a similar way and provided to the Housing Element Advisory Board. I hope that helps.
Ms. Armour, you wanted to jump in here?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to share one additional resource that we do have online, which actually is more in line with the question and answer or frequently asked questions. Over the last year, we have posted nearly weekly 31 posts on social media and on the website for the General Plan Update, a series called General Plan Update, Let's Break It Down. And it took questions that we had heard at the meetings in public comment, that I heard questions or concerns that I heard at the farmers market. That was often a great inspiration for these. And all 31 of these posts are available on the general plan update website. It's both on the cover page if you scroll down, or on the general plan basics page. That does give that additional information, and we'd be happy to share those with the Planning Commission when we put together a staff report for their continuing meeting next Monday, if that matches what you're looking for.
Councilmember Hudis.
Yeah, I did read that. I didn't find that they were, I thought that they were generalized, and rather than addressing the specific questions that were asked, in my reading of them, they were sort of generalized to the point of people maybe not being able to recognize their own question. And I certainly didn't find some of my questions answered in that format as well, and which is why I thought this additional supplement would be of value.
Councilmember Stack.
Thank you. Two questions of staff. One is the way I'm almost envisioning this, if I understand it correctly, is similar to in staff reports when we get appeals. There would be a series of questions that would be raised, and then in italics would be staff's response. At least that's how I'm interpreting the motion. And so I want to see if, one, that is how staff is also interpreting it. And two, if the questions that have been raised during those hearings, if they are similar in nature than what the 31 you've highlighted through your various committee meetings have been.
Thank you, Council Member. I think something similar to that could be included. I would definitely be looking for any direction if there are particular topics that the council feels have not been addressed in the materials so far. We did cover in a number of different ways, for example, the question about why the town was talking about this 3,738 housing units, for example, because I know that was a big question that a lot of people had. And we talked about some of the topics, for example, that the council had brought up and gave some additional information about it. There aren't always answers in the materials that were provided to Planning Commission. And so I guess the question is, if there are particular topics that you feel haven't been answered, we'd love to have that direction. And there was another thought I had, but I've lost it.
Through the mayor, I'll just jump in. As Councilmember Benami mentioned, Planning Commission is going to be continuing their consideration on Monday. There's no way we're going to pull together this type of document before that meeting, just from a staff resource perspective. I think I understand Councilmember Hudis is interested in us going back through those study sessions, re-listening to them, and then pulling out questions that have not been answered. If they may have been answered in another forum, we can still gather those into kind of one element and put it either in the FAQ as suggested, or look for other ways to communicate that. And then additionally, obviously, depending on where we are in the Planning Commission process, if we have that information before they're done deliberating, frankly, they're probably going to deliberate a lot of those same questions. And then we'll get that to them. If it is after their conclusion of their review and recommendation, then we'll make sure that, again, it gets up on the website as soon as we can get it up, and then gets to the bodies, depending on where we are in the process.
Councilmember Hudis?
Yeah, I would just say that I understand the time constraints with this. It's not a new request, but it is, I think, becoming more important that people see that their questions have been answered, because otherwise it's just pushing a bunch of information at people. It's not really engagement. And so I think it's of value to do it, even at this stage, particularly since I think the some of the issues are not resolved, and they will be somewhat contentious, and they'll be contentious up through the council's consideration. And it's a good practice to establish, I think, with the Housing Element Advisory Board, which is doing its work going forward. People kind of need to see that their question has been addressed, and if it's homogenized too much or summarized too much, etc., it looks like we're not engaging, and people will be will have less faith in the document that's produced if they don't feel that they've really had the input to it. So that's my thinking on asking that we take a fairly specific step with the motion that I proposed.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you. As I'm thinking about all the various questions, I mean, sometimes, first of all, it could be a lot of work because a lot of times people are asking the same questions in different ways. And so, to the extent I was kind of working with the idea that, questions get grouped together and then here's an answer. Now, to the extent that some questions might be very, very specific, I don't know how time consuming that would be for staff to get into the details of each and every question or to give a particularly curated answer when we've got so many questions. I think it's reasonable to, at some point, not before Monday's meeting, kind of chunk together the questions, even if they're just, well, I don't even want to give you too much work, but copy and paste and just chunk them all together. And then here's kind of the answer of those 31, it relates to this. I will say some of the questions, may not necessarily even be technically correct. When somebody asks, why are we doubling our arena? We're not doubling our arena. We're looking at a planning, we came up with a draft plan that came up with numbers that happened to be larger than the arena. Nobody's officially doubled the arena. We're not doing that. So I don't know how to answer a question like that. But I think to the extent that if somebody wrote a very specific question and they want to find it on the website and see a specific answer to it, I don't think I could ask staff to do that. But I think if we can kind of, from each study session at some point, just say, these are the questions that came out of here. Here's the areas they relate to, sort of what we have in the final EIR, where, the letters were summarized to each area. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud, I'm sorry. So Councilmember Hudes basically brought up 2 specific study sessions. So instead of like however many letters or things we've gotten, we're talking about 2 specific study sessions and the questions out of there. So if we have those questions, can they just be grouped by category with an answer that relates to that category? Is that something that would take months or weeks?
Let me just jump in here first, and I'm sure Jennifer and Joel will add on. My understanding of the motion is that part of the way staff respects the input that we receive is that we literally look at the specific questions that an individual asked during a study session, recognizing that people choose their words carefully. And so, as I understand the motion, the council member wants us to respect the words that were used by the individual. We could certainly still group questions together, such as RENA versus general plan capacity. What have other cities do? Why do other cities plan for more housing in their general plan compared to their RENA? We could have some of those types of answers, but we're going to hearing on Monday. And, I have my notes from the study session. I know staff has their notes from the study session, but I think the spirit of the motion is really the literal, as I understand it, is the literal words that people use. That's going to take us that same amount of time to have to rewatch those videos and essentially do a transcription of the public comments and the council questions and planning commission questions. And that is time that we frankly just don't have. We need to help our planning commission do the work. So we can do our best, if this motion passes, but we may not have those answers until the document's ready to come to council later on this spring. And again, I think we just have to moderate expectations given our staffing levels. And I think this is work that staff would need to do, not our consultants, because I think the level of attention that is being asked is something that really that we would have to give the care and attention to. And I defer to Director Paulson for any other clarification.
Thank you, Ms. Pavetti. So yeah, I agree with town manager's comments, I think, but we definitely can go back, look at the 2 study sessions, try to pull out questions that weren't answered. If there is an opportunity to group them together, we definitely will. We don't want to duplicate efforts if we don't have to in that type of document. And then we'll, like I mentioned before, when that effort is completed, we'll get it online. We'll get it to, if the Planning Commission is still deliberating, we'll get it to them before they make a recommendation. If it's after their recommendation, we'll forward that to the council. I think some of the comments and questions, get to, as I believe Ms. Armour might have mentioned before, we're really carrying forward the recommendation of the GPAC to the Planning Commission. There are a lot of topics and a lot of opportunities for modifications. I believe those conversations are going to be in the next meeting or 2 of the Planning Commission as we get into some of the other elements, because as I'm sure you're all aware, they are holding off for the land use and community design element till they've looked at the other elements. So I think we're going to get into a lot of those topics also during those meetings, but we will look at opportunities to review those meetings, pull out those questions, group them where possible, and then when that effort is completed, it will come before, again, either the Planning Commission or the Town Council, depending on where we are in the process.
Councilmember Hudis.
Yeah, I think that approach would be just fine. I think the public comment is already closed for the Planning Commission, so I don't think trying to get this done for the Planning Commission is essential at this point. Since a number of them were in, the meeting themselves. We have some different members, but this is really for the public, and the public will, I think, engage again when this comes to the council. So I think the steps that Director Paulson described would be valuable, even if it just comes a little bit later at the council level. And I have looked closely at Exhibit 7. I'm not going to comment on it, but I would say that face value, there's no answers. There's a position, neutral or whatever, but the answers really aren't in that section. And so I think this would be a valuable enhancement as we consider this.
And if I could, just one piece through the mayor, just so the council's aware and so the public's aware, even though the verbal communications portion has stopped, members can still submit written communications to the Planning Commission. So I definitely encourage that as well. So as they get to these other elements and continue their deliberations, that they can have any additional input that folks want to provide. And obviously, as you mentioned, there'll be another effort and opportunity in between Planning Commission and Council. So thank you.
So, I'm really struggling on this one to try to see if there's any value in this. I mean, I'm hearing staff say that they've spent time and they've pulled out, summaries of questions and answers, and there's 31 of them on there. And I'm still trying to figure out why we want to watch hours of video to answer questions. Is somebody re-asking those questions? If there's an unanswered question that somebody wants the answer to, why don't we just have them ask it again and get an answer to it, instead of trying to look through and find answers, questions not answered that somebody may not care about anymore. I'm really struggling with why we would sign up for all of this work. Councilmember Hudis?
I would just respond that I think It has to do with whether we care about public input to this process and whether we are looking for engagement or we're looking to push information on the public. And I think that makes a difference. So that's my thought.
And I still don't see this as engagement, right? The public engaged, got answers then, and we want to re-say those answers. I mean, they already engaged. So I'm still struggling. How does this increase public engagement?
I would respond that I've had hundreds of emails from people on their concerns about the general plan. And it isn't only the same question, and that there are, if you listen to the tape, the 3 hours and 14 minute September 20th, and then you listen to the December 7th, there are questions that people asked that are not answered. And so I would suggest it has to do with how much we value engagement with the public.
Councilmember Sack?
I think in my mind, and I don't want to speak for anyone, I think, and I'll just speak for myself. So at a variety of our meetings, a lot of attendees who are maybe this is their first time, they ask specific questions, not knowing that during these hearings, there really isn't this level of engagement where someone in the audience can ask a question and then there's no immediate response. So a couple of things that I'm hearing is these questions were asked, staff has answered them in a different format. And so in my mind, and I'd love it if someone could correct me, that we have the answers. It may not be in the exact verbiage that is being asked, but I do think there's a way to highlight the questions. And I think it is fair of staff to say what were in any of if any council members want to identify what they believe has not been answered, let's front those up front so that we don't necessarily have to hear all 3 hours. I want to be careful that I don't want any of our public to feel that we're not listening. And I think that's what Councilmember Hudes is most concerned about, is that if someone does arrive, they're asking a question, in some capacity, those questions are considered and answered in some format. It may not necessarily be in the format that they like, but I think we have to highlight where those answers are. And frankly, if we don't have the answers because it's premature, it's okay to say that. And so what I'm looking to staff right now is, because I believe in the intent of the motion, is there an ability to use what we already have and somehow reformat it, as Vice Mayor said, so that if someone is continuing to be engaged, those answers can be found in a simplified way instead of having to re-listen to the 3 hours. Because I think we're both trying to get to the same point, but we're trying to do it in a practical way given staff resources. And I think we're there. So that's what I'm looking at. Is there a way to somehow use the effort and work that has already been done by staff and try to group together the issues and questions that were asked at that meeting? And frankly, at this point, I'd be happy to help go through those hearings to see what are the top ones that I hear, because I do want to make sure that no one feels that we did this in a way that doesn't represent and value any of our community members' input.
Thank you, Councilmember Sayak, for that question and for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts based on the work that has been done so far in trying to answer the questions that we've received. And it is true that there are a number of questions and requests for information that have been repeated throughout the process. And that is why we put together the Let's Break It Down series. So we would be happy to take that and put it together in a form that is more easily accessible as a single document rather than the multiple graphics. if that's helpful. The goal there really was to get at those common questions. As with any frequently asked questions, any FAQ document, you're not going to get the literal word for word of the question because each person asks it in a different way. And sometimes we can answer multiple questions by phrasing it slightly differently. So we have worked to try and include that there. So hopefully that covers a lot of the questions, if in a more general way, plus sharing additional information. Also, I would say that the community meeting that we held last fall in October was extremely effective. We had a wonderful turnout in response to comments and suggestions from the council. We sent notice cards to every address in town, which we hadn't done previously. So that's one of those moments of flexibility where we went ahead and said, this investment to get that out to every address is worth it. And we had over 100 people interested in joining us and many public comments. And the format, since that wasn't a public hearing, there was the ability to do some question and answer and some response back. And we got really positive feedback in response to that meeting. And I loved going to the farmers market soon after that, because I had several people come by and say, oh, I saw you on Zoom, or you're the general plan lady. And so there as well has been a great opportunity to really have that engagement. At our public hearings, it's very controlled and it is difficult. And I understand that there is often that feeling that you ask a question, but that's not the form of those meetings. And that's why those reaching out to going to existing community meetings and going to the farmers market, going to Spring into Green this weekend, going to farmers market again in 2 weeks after that, really is an important part of making this true engagement of the community. And when we hear new comments, so for example, a couple of months ago, I had a comment from somebody who was really concerned about the maintenance of the existing rental housing and multifamily housing in town. That became one of our Let's Break It Down posts, giving some additional information about how that topic is covered in the general plan and inviting people to take a look in more detail and let us know if more is needed.
And so if I could follow up, Mayor, I think, and this is the difficulty of the motion, because I think we're all interpreting it differently. And so I believe I understand the maker of the motion's intent. I believe I hear staff saying we have the answers, and it's just perhaps a reformatting of it in a simplified, because I don't think 31 different posts would be helpful, because now we're looking at 31. But the way I'm interpreting the motion and what I anticipate is having, again, the answers that have already been provided in a simplified format. I would be supportive of that. But I don't want to get this aha moment where it's not in a specific format or in a certain verbiage that isn't addressing any of our expectations. So with that regard, I would be supporting it, understanding that that's my expectation of what that motion means.
Councilmember Hudes?
Yeah, I would agree with Councilmember Sayak's perception of what the intent is. And I also have faith in town staff based on the answers I heard tonight about what they would be prepared to do, that I don't think my motion needs to micromanage any more than it is, except to ask that, as I did in the motion, that another step be taken to further community engagement.
All right, so let me call the motion. Councilmember Hudes?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Aristo?
Aye, although I have a question, if the staff could read back what they're, if either town manager or somebody could read back what they think the motion is so that I know exactly what I'm voting on, please.
Thank you. I'll give it a try, and I'll rely on the maker of the motion to correct if something is missing. To further community engagement, post the questions and answers from the 2 study sessions, plus the questions and answers from the joint study session on the housing element. Provide these questions and answers to the Housing Element Advisory Board, the Planning Commission, and the Town Council. Post as FAQs on the respective websites. And that, for clarification, that it's all right to have summary versions of those questions and summary answers.
Councilmember Hudis,
Yes, I agree with that, especially with that last sentence added about summarizing. That's fine. I would just suggest that we pay attention so that people can recognize their question and we don't obscure their question. So I definitely agree with the way that the town manager summarized it.
okay, so I still have an aye from Councilmember Hudis, it sounds like. Vice Mayor Risto?
And then one further clarification, because I thought when the motion was made that it was all unanswered questions. But then what I'm hearing is it's all questions and answers from all those study sessions. So if the maker of the motion could clarify that intent, please.
It's from 2 study sessions. So, I mean, I would prefer that staff go through and look at those questions and summarize them rather than figure out what they think they've answered before. There are not all that many of them, and I think it would be of value at that level. So I didn't distinguish between unanswered and answered.
Okay. A reluctant aye, because I hate to give the staff more work to do, but I think it is important to recognize our community members' questions.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Councilmember Sayah?
Aye, and as I think staff had requested, I'll go ahead and listen to it as well and see if there's any that I feel have not been answered to try and front load those and assist our staff. Well, thanks.
And the mayor will, I'll go with a reluctant aye also. I'm worried that we're doing a lot of work that's not going to make any difference, but I'll vote aye to support this motion, and it passes unanimously. We don't need to read any ordinances, so I will close this item and move on to item 16, which is our local roadway safety plan.
Good evening. Ying Smith, Transportation Mobility Manager, and thank you, Mr. Andrews, for the presentation. Yes, thank you for allowing me the time to present the local roadway safety plan final report and recommendations. The town staff began the preparation of the plan in January 2021. After over a year, I'm happy to share that the project team has completed the work. Next slide, please. So the staff report provides a high-level summary of the process and recommendations. The final report is included as attachment 1. Sorry. This plan is, next slide, please. This plan is partially funded by a Caltrans grant. This slide shows the elements required by Caltrans and enhancements that we included in the Los Gatos plan. Next slide, please. The development of the local roadway safety plan was guided by a vision statement. And this vision statement is supported by the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission. Next slide, please. The preparation of the plan is a very data-driven process. Our consultant analyzed the collusion data in the most recent 5 years at the start of the process. So that was from 2015 to 2019. In addition to the data, the project team also relied on qualitative input from the police department and safety partners. Next slide, please. As one of the first steps, the project team identified the key collusion locations and corridors. There are quite a bit of them, and the map shows how the so-called hotspots as identified in red. Next slide, please. Then the project team developed the collusion risk profiles. The profiles describe the collusion characteristics as well as the contextual factors associated with multiple collusion types. Identifying the profiles is a part of a systemic process, which allows us to proactively identify locations which have similar contexts but may have experienced fewer collusions today. So that's actually a question that came up quite a bit when we work on projects. There's some locations we may not see a lot of collusions, which doesn't mean that those locations have nothing for us to worry about. There's a potential when we look at the entire system. So this kind of analysis allows us to be ahead of the curve. Among those risk profiles, the individual collusions may fall under multiple collusion profiles. For example, a collusion may be both a speed-related conflict and may also involve driving under the influence. So there's some overlapping here. Next slide, please. So just want to take a moment to recognize our community engagement and safety partner engagement process. Among the many tools we use in this process, I would really like to highlight the support and input from the safety partners and the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission. Next slide, please. The project team first identified an initial list of 12 emphasis areas using a combination of the number of collusions, the number of killed and severely injured collusions, and the systemic analysis results. These locations reflect a variety of contexts, location types, and collusion risk profiles. And what we show here is the 5 priority areas that were selected for further analysis. The other areas from the original list, they were not selected, not because they're not important, but because the town has already complete improvements, for example, at Highway 9 and Massau and Winchester and Lork. And in other cases, the design work is already included in the CIP projects. For example, the Highway 9 interchange, as well as the Blossom Hill location. So they were not included. That allows us the time and focus to look at the 5 priority emphasis areas. Next slide, please. So next, I would like to use 2 examples to show how the project team analyzed the priority areas, conducted a work audit, and then recommended countermeasures. So the first location is Tate Avenue. First, the team identified the top collusion factors and the collusion profiles. Next slide, please. Then the team prepared a list of draft countermeasures. We then held a work audit that was back in January with the safety partners. The group walked through the corridor, reviewed the countermeasures, and discussed how they could be implemented at specific locations. So this group of potential countermeasures were based on the work audits, the input we received, as well as additional input from town staff. Then the consulting team made adjustments and formulated those recommendations. Next slide, please. So the second example is Los Gatos Boulevard. This is the northern part of Los Gatos Boulevard. This is a very, very different location from Tate Avenue in many ways. However, the team took the same process in the steps we went through to look at this corridor. Next slide, please. So the list of potential countermeasures for Los Gatos Boulevard, they're very comprehensive, very long. For all the emphasis areas, the countermeasures that came out range in different levels of complexity as well as different costs. In the final report, we do have the countermeasure recommendations for all 5 priority emphasis areas. Next slide, please. The development of the local railway safety plan has been very meaningful in helping us understanding the safety profiles in Los Gatos. In addition to the data and analysis, staff is recommending implementation strategies with actions, phasing and sequencing. So we put our implementation actions in this 4 category with this timing built into it. And staff is recommending the 3 recommendations as in the staff report. First is to adopt the local roadway safety plan. Second is to direct staff to develop the short-term improvements and pursue grant funding. And the third is to direct staff to proceed with all other implementation actions that are identified in the plan. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Unmute. Okay, I don't see any questions right away. Let's go to the public and see if any members of the public wish to address us on this one. Don't see any hands, so let me close the verbal comment for this item and come back to council for questions and discussion and motions. Councilmember Hudis.
Thank you. In the staff report, it talks about the town considering formalizing a town pledge to Vision Zero strategies and values. How can we learn more about Vision Zero before pledging to it? Where can we learn more about this?
This is really a long-term. This is something for us to look into, but we're not asking the council to pledge the Vision Zero at this point. We are making progress in this effort in front of us, but of course we can continue the process in sharing information on Vision Zero, sharing other cities' examples and their experience. So we think those are the ways we can provide more information to you and to the community.
Yeah, no, I realize that we're not pledging tonight. I'm just trying to find out where can I read about this? How can the community learn more about what this is?
We would probably would be starting from the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission. We're happy to follow up with additional information with the town manager's direction. Staff is happy to do that.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you. I mean, I'm really excited to see this come forward. I actually was one of the people probably, I'm trying to think which town council, at least 6, maybe 8 years ago, meeting with each council member trying to get the town to adopt Vision Zero, which would have been a huge leap. But just to editorialize, the concept of Vision Zero is envisioning 0 deaths or life-changing injuries on roadways. And that's all users, because 38,000 people a year die in traffic collisions in the United States. So, knowing that we can change the design of our roadways to improve safety and decrease collisions is really near and dear to my heart. I don't want to see anybody in our community killed in traffic violence. So, watching this process unroll, knowing that the county is working on a similar kind of process, I think every city is starting to address this. I could talk about it all night, but I would actually like to make the motion, and then if people want to discuss it further, I move to adopt the local roadway safety plan, direct staff to develop the short-term improvements and pursue grant funding, and direct staff to proceed with all implementation actions in the LRSP.
Okay, we have a motion. Would anybody like to second? Councilmember Hudis?
Yes, I'll second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. Councilmember Hudis?
Aye.
Councilmember Badami?
Aye.
Mayor, you didn't take public comment.
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, nobody spoke.
Oh.
Yes. And there's also nobody left, pretty much.
Okay.
There's 2 people left, but I did ask them.
Yes, he did open public comment. There were no speakers.
I know I'm more tired than you all, but I'm sure I did it. So anyway, so we have an I think we had I from Councilmember Badami. And so Vice Mayor Risto
Aye.
and Councilmember Sack.
Aye, sorry about that.
Well, it's quite possible I would forget, but and the mayor votes aye, so it passes unanimously. And I believe this is our last item. And let's see, so.
It is, Mayor.
It is our last item, and we don't have to read any ordinances, so I guess with that, we could be adjourned. Thank you. Good night.